Racing isn't easy, but experiencing it is. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat with the industry's leading sim racing game. Drive on laser scan replicas of the greatest racing circuits from around the world. Go head-to-head against other drivers chosen by skill-based matchmaking to ensure competitive racing at every level. Compete across all your favorite series. In officially licensed cars, engineered to deliver the most accurate driving experience possible. Join a race or host your own with players from across the globe. Race against the computer or in a league with friends. Feel the thrill behind the wheel. Visit iRacing.com.
And here in the historic hills of Belgium, we are back for the 5th round of the FMA Prototype Challenge Series, where GTPs, LMP2s, and this week a special new class, the GT3s, all come together for some great racing action in the FMA circuit. Hi everybody, welcome to another great Thursday night of racing at another iconic circuit. We only give you good racetracks, we only give you fun on Thursday nights, and tonight we come to the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps, a track that everybody out there in the world really is probably familiar with. If you know racing, you know this circuit, you know Eau Rouge, you know the famous corners that make up this beautiful, long, technical, difficult circuit that tonight will play host to a 90-minute endurance race, something a little different for the FMA series. You've seen us do 60 and will now see us do 90 minutes of racing action. Hi everybody, I'm Marshall Crocker, as always, your host, your producer here on Thursday nights at FMA. And disregard that graphic, it is not Alex Goldschmidt tonight. He has taken the week off as he's busy flying all over Europe as he does for Porsche Cup related action in the real world. Today I'm joined by Brian Zinn, making his debut tonight in FMA action. And Brian, you said you're familiar with Spa. Everybody in the racing world has to be, because it's one of the iconic venues, and when you love prototypes such as yourself, you can imagine why Prototypes at Spa is going to be such a fun challenge tonight.
Absolutely. Spa always puts on great racing, and when you throw sports cars in the mix instead of your usual Formula One, it's even more special. And anybody that remembers the excellent finish that the WEC had a couple seasons ago that produced the first privateer LMH winner, that was a special thing to see. So it's going to be great fun tonight. I'm looking forward to joining in the booth here tonight in Alex's spot and calling some fantastic action.
Here in beautiful Stavelot, Belgium, you see the track map for our track preview, and we'll be talking about it from a driver's perspective quite a bit. What's the difficulty? What do drivers need to look out for? But I don't mean to, answer too much for it. I think it's a little bit of everything. But what is it that makes Spa such a fun track, not just from a driver's perspective, but especially for us to watch at home?
Yeah, absolutely. 19 corners. It's got the elevation that it's famous for. You start out going up that tall hill of Eau Rouge and Radillon, and then you got the long Kemmel straightaway down to Lake Coombe. And from there, it starts getting a little bit technical. You work your way through Malmedy and Rivage and through No Name, through the double left-hander of Pouhon, and that's where you're starting to wish that you had all the aerodynamic grip that you can get out of your car. And as you work your way around through Stavelot and down to Blanchimont, where you start picking up speed into the famous bus stop chicane, and it just presents a unique challenge to these drivers, where the first and the last half of the lap is focused on speed, but that middle sector, you're wanting all the mechanical grip you can get.
It's ultimate. It's the ultimate setup challenge, isn't it, Brian? I mean, you got to think about the low downforce setup, and this is an open setup series. Something drivers will have been considering: the low downforce for the straightaways, but those high lateral load corners through the midsection of this racetrack, the medium speed. It's two different setups, but you can only pick one. That's why it's going to be so fun to watch for round 5. And while we will have 3 classes tonight, again, the endurance race tonight, the FMA advisors, they wanted the GT3 class. They wanted to add a little bit of spark to the longer race tonight, but we only have 2 classes for points, and here they are. Brock Morris continues to lead that GTP class, but what a battle it's been this season. Brock Morris and Anthony Jenkins have been back and forth, not just in the points, but on the racetrack. It was a photo finish, a last lap pass. Jenkins beats Morris at Daytona to start off the year. Last week, he gets him back at Spielberg, the Red Bull Ring. It was Jenkins getting one up on him again on Morris, who had won the midsection, the 2-3-4 split of the season. So those 2 guys at the top of GTP are going to put on a show tonight. But we've got Matsko, Davis, and Brian Scott rounding out your top 5. Scott's missed a couple races. Matsko and Jay Davis have been consistent presences in GTP. Ryan Peters, Anthony Sorrentino, Zach Tankersley, who tonight runs a GT3, Jacob Brown, and Matt Mars round off your top 10. Mars will be in the GT3 class as well. Looking to the other side, the LMP2 class, well, it's Jeremy Eshelman leading a slightly closer championship battle at the top of that order. It's Gustavo Ferrara and Decio Lima, the 2 Vortex Racing Brazilian teammates. Keep an eye on those Brazilian drivers here tonight, because Maicon Gizzoni, who you see at the bottom of that list, P10 in points, he has been a force to be reckoned with this season since he joined later in the calendar. Outside of that, it's going to be Ignacio Arroyo, teammate of Jeremy Eshelman there in P4, Broughton Jones in 5th, Eduardo Salles, David Marino, Jody Nielsen, and Aaron Sanford prior to Vortex's Maicon Gizzoni. Here's the racing schedule for the entire Freedom Motorsports Alliance Prototype Challenge Series. Again, the first, you could consider it an endurance race, but we'll have even longer contests later in the year. But the first endurance race of the year tonight before Monza next week. Look forward to another iconic Italian Formula 1 circuit there. Then we got Hockenheim, Le Mans, an iconic circuit in its own right, Silverstone for a 2-hour enduro on May 14th. Then the 21st, it's Imola. The 28th, it's Sebring. And we finish off the American leg of the calendar on June 4th for the double points, double length finale on June the 4th. What a calendar, what a season, and let's get started with tonight's racing grid. Let's walk through it here. Tonight's pole sitter, it is going to be the man I just discussed a moment ago, Mr. Anthony Jenkins. He and Brock Morris have gone back and forth for the finishes in the race all season. Tonight, they make it interesting, starting in qualifying. Front row, Jenkins and Morris. Jenkins with the advantage in P1 and 2. Looking to 3rd and 4th place, Faraz Ibrahim, a Canadian, alongside myself, the only Northerner in the field. He'll start the Porsche in that P3 grid slot. P4 is going to be Eduardo Salles for the aforementioned Vortex Racing, before we go into P5 and P6, made up of Evan Gilmet and Brandon Dempsey. Dempsey, a newcomer tonight. He's sharing his camera for this evening, so we'll get a chance to keep an eye on him throughout tonight's race. And the pair of Cadillacs on row 4, it's Robert Milbrath and Jay Davis before the LMP2 grid kicks off. Your top 2 tonight in LMP2, Brandon Anderson and our aforementioned championship leader, Jeremy Eshelman.
Yeah, and starting P11 was that aforementioned Maicon Gizzoni, who you said has been a rocket ship since he joined the league. But later on in this calendar, and to his outside is going to be Decio Lima, his fellow Brazilian. Next to him in P13 is going to be Ignacio Arroyo, and Gustavo Ferreira, the other fellow Brazilian, is starting in P14. Jody Nelson is going to line up in P15 with Broughton Jones to his outside, starting in 16th place. And then we flip to the first of our GT3 runners. Anthony Baranco and his Mustang is going to start on pole in GT3. Alex Jacobson is going to be to his outside. Matt Mars and Zach Tankersley are going to round out your GT3 field.
Keeping an eye here down the rest of the grid, it's going to be Ryan Peters and Christopher Pugliese, each a GTP and an LMP2 respectively. They're going to start down the field tonight, as they did not set a qualifying time, as is the same for Aaron Sanford there in the LMP2 class. He's in the top 10 in points in the second tier of divisions. Matt Mars there in GT3. He's often a GTP driver, but tonight he comes in off a hot performance on Monday night. He almost took pole in the FMA GT3 series this week. This week he tries to do it in another relatively low downforce circuit here at Spa. Well, rounded off Zachary Tankersley and the current amateur division leader, Dustin Wells, on Monday nights. He comes in tonight, going to do a one-off here in the GT3 class. Well, we are ready. I'm excited. I hope you're all ready at home for what should be a great hour and a half of racing. It's going to be Jenkins. It's going to be Morris on the front row. And, well, we talk about circuits that bring out the best when the best is needed. Some of the iconic performances in all of motorsport. Think about, Formula One's often the one that's brought up. Max Verstappen, some of his iconic championship-making performances took place on the hills of Belgium. And you got to think about George Russell's performance famously in a Williams in qualifying in the wet back in, I believe, 2021. One of his career-making performances. The best find a way to make it work here at Spa. And some of the top drivers in all the classes are going to have to do so tonight. Here we go. The GTP is getting ready to take the trip out of the final corner for the first time, but not the last time today. Jenkins on the right side of your frame. Morris alongside him on the front row. And green flag is in the air. They're going to hold on the leader, and there they go. Green flag for the start of the FMA Prototype Challenge, 5th round enduro at Spa-Francorchamps. Lead holds for Anthony Jenkins through turn number 1. He holds the inside. Here comes your LMP2 class to the start-finish line. And a good jump there for your pole sitter in LMP2, Mr. Brandon Anderson.
Yeah, here come the GT3s firing down the start-finish line for their split start. Anthony Blanco and his Mustang is going to hold station, heading down into La Source for the first time, as we've got a battle brewing almost immediately between Morris and Jenkins. Those two have been fighting all season long, and they're continuing their battle here as they fly into Lake Coon for the first time.
Holding the outside is Morris. Look at the wheelmanship there by the Cadillacs. Both guys trying to go side by side here on cold tires in the early stages. Keep an eye on Eduardo Salas, who peeked to the inside there for a moment on Anthony Jenkins. Thinks better of it. Slots back into P3. That is a spot gain for Mr. Brock Morris, who got a beautiful run there up through Eau Rouge and Radion, and then took it on the straightaway. Brock Morris, after getting pipped by Jenkins to pole, already has the lead. And as Salas and Guillemette promote themselves, it's Faraz Ibrahim, who's already dropped down to P5.
Yeah, these drivers battling cold tires for the first time. Spa is a very tricky course on the opening lap. Salas in particular, he's hoping the all-wheel drive advantage of the Ferrari keeps him in close contention to Morris and Jenkins in front of him, both using the Cadillac V8 power to try and pull away.
Good start here for Brandon Anderson in the LMP2 class. He was starting in the pole position there as well. Really strong start. Mike Congizzoni, who we know is very fast. Again, he joined later in the season. He's already promoted himself a spot as well, because Jeremy Eschelman has already fallen 2 positions, uncharacteristically not in his typical team livery, alongside Ignacio Arroyo on down the inside through a high-speed sweeper. You don't see a lot of passes in there. Gutsy move there for Jeremy Eschelman. He's trying to fight his way back as quickly as he can into the top 3 positions. And there is Ignacio Arroyo, his teammate as well, going with him. Each getting by Decio Lima there down that very long backstretch, which I would say, Brian, alongside that exit to Radion up through that long front straightaway section, that's probably going to be the best passing opportunity, is this hard braking zone as Decio Lima back in front of Ignacio Arroyo.
Yeah, absolutely. As you saw there, utilizing the draft to get into the brake zone of the bus stop chicane. As you see Alex Jacobson trying to do the exact same maneuver on Anthony Barranco in front of him. Nothing doing there. They're holding station as they work their way through the bus stop for the first time. But absolutely using the draft to your advantage and then try and outbrake the guy next to you and do it cleanly too. That's the third part of the challenge.
Talk about outbreaking. There goes Brandon Dempsey up to P5 there, a newcomer to the series. We haven't seen him for too many races, but we do have his camera here tonight. A little bit low there, but you see the calm patience there on the wheel. And what's going to be so interesting in this race, Brian, that we haven't seen in other races, as we take a look here at Mike Congizzoni battling for the lead in LMP2, is the length, is the endurance element of today. A half hour longer is tonight's race, but if you've ever been in the cockpit or you've seen racing, Brian, you'll speak to it. That half hour can feel like an eternity in a longer race, as Anthony Barranco has gone around elsewhere in the field. He was leading last we checked GT3, my own teammate on Monday nights. Let's see what happened to the Mustang of Barranco.
Man, just a classic Radion mistake there. Just gets a little bit too much curbing as he crests the hill, and unfortunately the rear end of his Mustang meets the Armco and a quick trip to the pits. They do have a fast repair tonight. They did have some deliberation in Discord whether they would have a fast repair tonight. It looks like Anthony is going to be very happy to have that fast repair once his tow gets done. But yeah, absolutely. The extra half hour, depending on if you're the hunter or the chaser, is going to be interpreted very differently. If you're being hunted, you wish the race would end sooner, and if you're the one doing the hunting, you wish the race would go on longer, as we see Evan Gilmet there trying to defend from the Ferrari. Nice move there from Eduardo Salas, demonstrating how to make a move in the bus stop as he moves himself up into P3 for the moment. Perez Ibrahim, he's got some action brewing in front of him with Brandon Dempsey.
Yeah, nice piece of driving from a couple drivers there in that that hard braking zone section. It's so tough there. It's one thing to get down the inside, but you see it in Monza Turn 1 as well. Drivers having to give each other space is always the tough part there, but I find it FMA, especially in the Prototype Challenge, especially in a longer endurance race, you're more than likely going to see guys giving each other that little bit of room because, you know, you can't win it on lap, 3, but you can certainly lose it as Eduardo Salas and Evan Gilmet continue to battle. Salas manages to hold that position in the Ferrari down the very long front straightaway into turn number 4. And the Porsche of Evan Gilmet starts a trio of Porsches. It's going to be Porsche, 4, 5, 6. And the pair of Cadillacs continue to lead there in GTP as battle for the lead in LMP2. Mike Congizzoni going to take that same opportunity up through Radion to the all-important exit, which is hard to do there in the dirty air, but it can give you a good rundown into turn number 4. And just a moment ago, it got Gizzoni P1 and LMP2. Let's see how he did it.
Yeah, taking advantage of the draft down the Kemmel straightaway, getting a little bit of side draft off the side there. If you're an Oval fan, you know what I'm talking about there. But just rockets by him, beats him in the brakes to hold station there, and job done.
Job done indeed. Mike Congizzoni's looked very strong, as have his Vortex Racing teammates all throughout the season. You'll see them in the black and green livery you currently see on your screen. New race leader then. We saw a moment ago Anthony Branco goes off there at the exit of Radion, and here is your current leader there in the GT3 class. That's Alex Jacobson, who he's a Pro-Am class driver there on Monday nights. I think many of us would say he is a Pro-Am and a Pro and Pro-Am's clothing, if you want to use the famous verbiage. He is an incredible driver in that GT3, incredibly consistent. He pushed me to the limit on Monday night this week in the Monza race for the FMA GT3 series. He and I had a great little back and forth in lap times. He is an absolute burner, and so is his teammate who currently sits P3 in class, the fellow driver on that team, that Threshold Motorsports entry of Dustin Wells. He's an amateur in that class who is arguably maybe even a pro in his own right. Looking through the field, we just had Robert Milbrath somewhere on the racetrack go off. We'll take a look at what happened to the driver currently sitting in 9th in the GTP class.
Yeah, you can see he's dropped his left side tires in the grass briefly going through the bus stop chicane, and then just gets on the throttle a little bit too eagerly and has a little half-hard spin there, but thankfully does not collect any of the walls around him and is able to carry on. Just some time lost there, no harm, no foul. But going back to Alex Jacobson and Dustin Wells, it sounds like we've got a couple of Ben Keatings amongst our midst there, of a super silver, as they would call them in real-world WEC terms. But yeah, Alex Jacobson. Oh, and Zachary Tankersley in his Aston Martin. He's had a moment going through Stablo, looks like. There is a bump there mid-apex. Doesn't look like... it might have unsettled the car a little bit, but ooh, such a hard smack into the inside wall there. That is not going to do any favors to that right front suspension of his Aston Martin. We'll see if he makes his way down pit lane to utilize his fast repair. But I was just saying there's a bump mid-corner there, and it didn't look like initially it unsettled the car, but it might have played a part in that spin as Brandon Anderson. What has happened to Mike Congizzoni? He was leading, but maybe had some connection issues?
We're going to take a look here. He had just passed back Brandon Anderson for P1 in the LMP2 class. Yeah, internet connectivity. He's still showing as in the session on my screen there, but you never know what that's going to be, right? You know, it could be, yeah, he's back on the racetrack, is still your race leader in LP2, but if you're having internet issues at the start of an Enduro, a 90-minute race like tonight, my first instinct is always, is it a computer overheating issue or something that's going to come up again or get worse even throughout the course of the race? And that's going to be something, I know we always talk about it from the driver's perspective here, Brian, but if you're Brandon Anderson sitting there in P2, you're just as worried about his internet issues as yours, because a high-speed circuit like this, you're going to be making like late in the straightaway sends, very, very last-minute dynamic moves. That's hard to do when the car in front of you is blinking in and out of existence. It's something real drivers don't have to deal with, but is a real worry here and a real concern in the simulator.
Absolutely. You know, you're trying to place your car in relation to the car in front of you, and then all of a sudden it disappears, and you're kind of throwing your hands up saying, where did you go? I can't you know, you don't want to keep pushing because you don't want to end up in the back of the guy and either spin him or do damage to your own car. So, as you said, definitely a unique challenge to the virtual racing that real life drivers don't have to deal with. But for Brandon Anderson, I'm sure he's keeping that in the back of his mind, maybe even going over to the comms to let my son know that he is having some blinking issues. And if you're Ghizzoni, you're saying, man, I'm leading this race. This is the wrong time to be having internet issues. And so I'm sure he's probably hoping that it sorts itself out, and the connection improves.
Well, in that battle with Gizzoni for the lead in LMP2, it's a Brandon chasing. In this battle, it's a Brandon leading. Brandon Dempsey here, P5 on the racetrack and in the GTP category. He currently leads Faraz Ibrahim. Here is a little tiff going on between Robert Milbrath and Ryan Peters. We saw Milbrath go off a moment ago here, and now he gets in a bit of a battle as Dustin Wells is now taking the quick jump down to pit road after an incident. We'll keep an eye here, see if Milbrath can make a move through the technical right-left sweeper here. He does not. Looks like he's backing off. So let's see. This is Dustin Wells, the driver we just talked about a moment ago. One of the threshold performance cars in GT3. He was running third at the time. No, it's a voluntary trip down pit road here. Only, what is it, 12 minutes into the start of this race? He didn't notice anything myself on the racetrack throughout the course of his lap that suggested he should have any damage. So not sure what happened there to the number 115 car, Dustin Wells. He currently sits in P4 in class just by virtue of the lack of drivers in GT3 and the fact that Branco is already out of this race. And again, Branco has returned to the racetrack, but he is currently sitting a lap down.
Yeah, not sure, although it appears Wells may have rejoined the race himself, so not sure if he had an issue going on that he had to rectify or just something going on at home that he had to tend to. Again, something real-world drivers do not have to be distracted by, but the unnecessary evil of virtual sim racing at home. As we see Faraz Ibrahim and his Red Bull Porsche try and run down the Porsche in front of him, of Brandon Dempsey. The Porsches so far through 12 minutes or so seem to be lacking the pace to the Cadillac and the Ferrari in front of them, but it is a long race and strategy will be a factor, so we'll see if Faraz and Brandon and the rest of the Porsche cohort in GTP can come up with something to counteract the outright speed that Jenkins and Morris are displaying at the moment, as they've pulled almost 3 seconds over Eduardo Salas at the moment.
Well, we've seen some truly iconic battles here in this series between these top two that find each other on track again. Remember, Jenkins was your pole sitter. He kicked this thing off, but since then, it has been the Brock Morris show up front, as it feels like it is kind of every night in a lot of series here in FMA. He is a truly dominant driver in a variety of disciplines, and tonight he currently sits in front of Anthony Jenkins, but Jenkins starting to track him down, and a big piece of why we saw just a moment ago was the lap car, I believe, of Zachary Tankersley here in the GT3 class. Let's talk a little bit about that dynamic, because I know with the smaller field size, 24 cars tonight as opposed to up to 60 that can run in real-world multi-class GT racing, but it can be truly so costly here at a track like Spa where exit speed is so crucial. If one car gets up to your inside, you don't get your preferred line there, Brian, you are losing 1 second, 2 seconds if you hit lap traffic at the wrong time. That could make the difference in this battle.
Absolutely, and for somebody that thinks of Spa and thinks of the long straightaways that exist for the Kemmel straightaway and the back straight through Blanchimont, you're going, man, how do you really get hung up by slow traffic? But the reality is that going through Lecum or Malmedy or Rivage or some of these other slower speed or medium speed corners, if you don't get by them and put them in between you and the guy you're battling with, you'll lose half a second to a second, like you said, and next thing you know that 2-3 second gap that you were enjoying is now nothing, and the guy behind you is back within draft range doing those long straightaways. So it's definitely a game of cat and mouse, and traffic management is a factor that these drivers have to manage, even with the small field size that we have tonight, relative to what you would expect in real world racing or even some of the special events. As we see Faraz Ibrahim, he has a moment there exiting Lecum, locks up the brakes. No ABS in GTP, so it makes it easy to lock it down, as they say, and keep the car from heading into the wall. But that has allowed Jay Davis now to close up right on the gearbox of the Porsche in front of him.
Yeah, reminder,
and
Jay Davis currently sitting top 5 there in the GTP points. He's currently P7 in the race right now. A couple new drivers starting to make their debuts in this series as the season goes on, and of course not to mention the GT3 drivers that make their debut tonight with the double discipline. But it is going to be something to watch here. Guys like Jay Davis with the longer race, with the longer distance. We have 3 endurance races on the calendar this season, and we talked about earlier, we've reiterated just how much different it truly is than only a 60-minute sprint and what it brings out of drivers. We'll see. Guys like Jay Davis, guys sitting up there pretty high in the points. Are these endurance races going to present an opportunity for them to work their way up? If consistency is more their name than the pure pace we've seen out of guys like, again, Morris, Jenkins, and even a guy who's running really well right now in the 203.4s, matching your top 2, Eduardo Salas.
Yeah, and for a driver like Morris or Jenkins that can run fast and manage the pace over the course of an endurance race, that's a rare skill set to have. And so, as you said, it will be interesting as the time goes on and you start going past the 60-minute mark that these drivers are used to in their normal races to see if there's some chinks in the armor, you know, a little bit of fatigue. You're sitting there for a long time in the rig, and, you know, if you don't do special events, the normal official races on iRacing do not go past 45 or 60 minutes. And so for a lot of these guys, it may be their first time driving in the car for this long. So we'll see how that works out towards the end of this race.
We just hit the 15-minute mark out of 1.5 hours here in the FMA Prototype Challenge, round 5 Enduro here at Spa-Francorchamps. Keep an eye here on Brandon Anderson. He started P9 overall, but he was P1 in class. He was the pole sitter here in the LMP2 class. Now he sits in P2, and he and Mike Angizoni have had quite the duke back and forth in terms of lap times. I've been keeping an eye back and forth on where the advantage lies. Last time by, the advantage went the way of Brandon Anderson by 1/4 of a second. You see the first headlight flash I've seen of the day. He's flashing the current leader in the, I almost call it the Pro-Am category. That's Mondays. It's, pardon me, not Monday, and it's not the GT3 leader. It is actually Dustin Wells, who currently sits in P3, so 2 threshold performance drivers there in the top 3, one of whom letting the LMP2 leaders by right now. That's Wells, and we haven't talked about it much, but Matt Mars currently sitting in P2, the Lobelville, Tennessee native. He is running a strong race right now, consistent, strong lap times, but he's got a 7.8-second gap to make up here to Alex Jacobson, your leader in GT3. But again, he's got plenty of time to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And for Wells, who had that uncharacteristically early pit stop, he's worked his way back up to P3 in class. As we see Jenkins and Morris, our overall leaders, work their way past Matt Mars there in his Mercedes.
Strong race so far for Jenkins. Yeah, the former FMA GT3 champion, I should add here, Brian. He's a guy with pedigree, and he's a guy that when I heard about the endurance race, the longer races added to the calendar, he's the first guy I thought of because of what he's proven. Again, not necessarily individual race to race pure pace, although he has it. He was tonight's pole sitter, but his consistency over the course of the calendar, I think he'll be specifically a guy to watch in these longer races. Even though last time by did lose about a second to Morris, but I have quite good confidence that you'll see more from him as this hour goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. And at 1.8 seconds between Morris and Jenkins, that can easily be made up with a better pit stop, a better end lap, multiple things when it gets time to make a visit down pit lane. So if I'm in Jenkins' shoes, I'm not ultimately worried at this point in time. There's still a long way to go. They're starting to work through the GT3 traffic as they work their way by Alex Jacobson, our GT3 class leader there you saw in the background. So for Jenkins, a guy that has consistency and pace, I'm sure he is perfectly happy running his race at the moment. He's settled into a nice rhythm and just trying to mitigate any losses as they work their way through the slower traffic.
You really get a sense here up in the blimp camera of the sheer scope of this racetrack. Spa is a long, long lap, and it's one of those things for me, Brian, that in endurance racing, I love a racetrack that is pushing you as a driver all the way through, is so technical that you don't get a break off. I know for a lot of people, it's why a race like where we started the season, the Daytona International Speedway, is appealing for a lot of endurance racers because you get the oval, you get that break, you get kind of a mental break from all the technical sections. With Spa, you get that a little bit. You get the longer straightaways, you get a bit of a rest, you get a bit of a passing opportunity. But tracks like Le Mans or some of these iconic circuits that I guess even Le Mans got a crazy long back straightaway. You have to get around a long lap at some point. Same with the Nürburgring, has one of the longest straightaways in the service. But these technical circuits, they're so much fun for endurance racing because it's harder to get in a rhythm with a long track. And that's why I'm confident. We've already seen a couple fast drivers like Faraz Ibrahim, who started P3 in the GTP class, make little mistakes, little losses of grip. And as the tires go away, that's going to be the next thing to consider. Pit strategy. When do drivers want to take tires? Are you taking tires on every stop? Or are you risking it and going along, maybe trying to save a pit stop? And I'll tell you right now, Brian, I know these drivers. I don't think everybody completely has pit strategy buttoned up. I don't think they know what they're going to do. And I think that decision, how much you can save tires, it's hard for us as commentators to keep track of. But it could spell the difference in this race, especially when margins are so close. Even in LMP2, Eshelman only 2 seconds back. One strategy call could decide this race.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And from doing multiple special events in the LMP2 personally, I know that, you're looking at roughly 40 to 45 minutes a stint. So, if it's closer to 40 minutes around Spa at an hour and a half for a race, that means you're going to have a splash at the end. And so for drivers that are able to do a little fuel saving or are able to save their tires, you're probably going to do a full tire and fuel service for your first stop. But that second stop is where I think the strategy is going to come into play there on how much fuel you actually have to take. Plus, at a lap like Spa, you have a lot of opportunities to have a better in lap than the guy that you're battling, which pays dividends over the course of the entire pit stop. So I completely agree with you. The funny thing about watching a race at Spa versus racing a race at Spa is how those laps are perceived. It looks long when you're watching it on TV, but when you're behind the seat, it does not drive like a long lap. You're like, man, that was a lap already, but there is no rest at Spa. Absolutely not. And as you see there on the board with Jay Davis as he works his way around the McLaren of Alex Jacobson, when you start throwing traffic in the mix, some of those places you're thinking that you're going to get a rest, you don't have a rest because you're having to work your way through slower traffic.
Well, you know who else doesn't have a rest is Maicon Gizzoni and Brandon Anderson. They have continued to stay within about a half a second this entire stint. I haven't seen a gap in a lap time more than 0.3 of a second in, probably 6 laps now. These two are just perfectly even, perfectly matched on pace. We got a car coming into pit road here. Brandon Dempsey, currently sitting P5 upon pit entry in the GTP class, will take his first trip here down pit road. If we can find him, there's the driver of the number 195 car. 199, pardon me. Here comes Brandon Dempsey down pit road for the first stop of the day. And I'll tell you, limited fuel loads in this series, I can't remember the number. My gut says 55%. But that's going to be a fascinating element of this too, is you don't get that many laps on a tank of fuel because of how long the lap time is. And you made a great point there a moment ago, Brian, about the potential for an overcut or an undercut, because the decision to pit is so infrequent here at Spa. You have so few opportunities. You're two minutes apart for the GTPs. That's their lap time. 2 minutes 9 for the LMP2s. Almost 2 minutes 20 for the GT3s. Tires can change a lot in that time. Fuel tanks can drain a lot in that time. And just on cue, here come both LMP2 leaders, Gizzoni and Anderson, taking their first pit service of the day. 21 minutes into the race.
Yeah, and Jeremy Eshelman is pitting with them as well. And I was going to call him out as well. If Gizzoni and Anderson started battling in front, and I'm sure for Jeremy, he was wishing that they would start battling because he was starting to work into the picture as well. He was just lurking in the background, not really falling back as well. But yeah, to your point, limited fuel loads, looks like everybody, at least for this first stint, seems to be on the same strategy, at least in LMP2. The entire class looks like has worked their way down pit road and is currently taking service as we look at our overall leader, Brock Morris, wondering if he's going to answer the call to come down pit road.
Yeah, we're going to see here as he comes through the final low-speed chicane. Yes, he is. Pit road service number 1 for the race leader in GTP. He's led all 10 laps on tonight's race. You can see there on the bottom right corner of your screen, it is going to be all the GTPs coming in. Morris is in, Jenkins is in, Salas is in, Gilmet is in. We'll see if anybody is brave enough here to stay out the extra lap. I think that could be a very big moment if a driver can just get off sequence, get off cycle. Because the math says here, as we get to the 107 mark, these drivers in GTP went 23 minutes. And excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, I'm about to try to do some mental math. We're going to, everybody hold on to your butts, but I believe, 23 minutes, you're going to time out to about 2 more stops on the dot. You're close to needing 3. 23 multiplied out, it's an hour 9. We got an hour 6 left here as we speak, as Brock Morris, just keep an eye on how long his pit service is, looks normal, and he's actually going to extend that lead to Jenkins on pit exit. Jenkins going to lose a couple seconds in pit service. But that's going to be something to consider as well, as how close that margin here is you can't really, if that was a fuel stop, which I assume it was, you can't really push tire strategy too much, because you got to pit on the same lap as everybody else. If your rubber gets worn out a little faster than the field, well, you can't just come down pit road, because again, that 2-minute margin, it doesn't give you much to work with. And this pit cycle worked out. I can't understand his usually his beautiful livery, the same one matching Ignacio Arroyo, the Threshold Performance Scheme, for whatever reason, not loading tonight for him. So the bright kiwi green, the number 03 of Jeremy Eshelman, he's moved up, P3. He's moving up even closer to Brandon Anderson. And again, with all the cars pitting on the same lap exactly in every class, I think, Brian, this race could come down a lot more to pace than we thought it might go to strategy.
Yeah, I think so. As you looking at the intervals post pit stop, Gazzoni seems to have stretched his lead. That it was about half a second going into the pits, and now it's about 2.8 seconds. So definitely a better pit stop for my zone compared to Brandon. But for Jeremy Eichelman, he's much closer than he was entering the pits, and so he's going to try and take advantage of the draft range now, sitting about 1.1 seconds back of Brandon Anderson. But yeah, I definitely think pit strategy will still be a factor, though. You have to make that decision, especially if you're in GTP, with cold tires being a significant thing now on the service for the prototype cars, and a little bit too for the GT3 cars, but more so in the prototype classes, of weighing the dynamic of, are you better to have warm tires when you leave the pits and get right back up to speed immediately on your outlap, or is it better to have the tire life at the end of the stint? So weighing that with being able to do tires and fuel at the same time and taking roughly the same amount of time will be an interesting dynamic to monitor, especially for our GT class drivers.
Saw just a moment ago the pass for P5. Brandon Dempsey pretty comfortably going to get ahead of Ryan Peters there. Ryan Peters driving the orange Dragon. It's kind of a tribute somewhat to Spike, the LMP2 AO Racing livery in the real world. Ryan Peters going to take his first pit service of the day. I have a suspicion here. Color me incorrect if I'm wrong here. I think he may be out of gas. I think Ryan Peters tried to push that extra lap. He was P5 at the start of the lap. Now rolling slowly into pit road here. He is indeed out of fuel. And that's going to tell us, Brian, just how close you're going to cut it on a tank of fuel here. The GTP said they got one more lap. Probably run out of fuel there, as we just saw.
Yeah, without doing some heavy lifting and coasting down these straightaways, I do expect that to be the result for everybody that tries to push it an extra lap. Unfortunately, Ryan Peters had to pay the price, but everybody, I'm sure, is paying attention to that and is putting that in the back of their minds come the later pit stops in this race. As Dustin Wells had a moment there, we just happened to pick that up on the camera. He's going through Stavelo again. There's that mid-corner bump, and it unsettles the Aston Martin. We've seen this story before. Smacks the right side wall. And a tow back to the pits awaits him. Unfortunate result there for Dustin Wells, who saw the car disappear there. Not sure if that's just him hopping out or if he's called done on his race. We'll have to keep an eye on that. But his teammate Alex Jacobson is not calling done on anything. He stretched his lead in GT3 over Matt Mars out to 12.8 seconds. I don't believe the GT3s have come down pit road yet for their service, but that is typical of GTs versus prototypes. They're able to go much longer on their fuel loads.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Jacobson and Mars, your top two in GT3, have yet to pit. Then it's a one-lap gap back to Tankersley there, who is currently P3s on the podium there in the GT3s. He has pitted. So just the top two, Jacobson and Mars, have yet to pit there in the GT3 class. We'll keep an eye here on Jacobson as he comes through the final corner. See if, perchance, he does take pit service. He does not. So, yeah, to your theory, Brian, it often tracks that, yeah, GT3s just don't use quite as much fuel, don't guzzle down as much petroleum as these high-speed prototype race cars, and that's going to be another element of this race that isn't over. Even for the GT3 leader, Jacobson there, who sits, well, now as Matt Marks comes down pit road, going to be even further into the race lead. You still have to navigate traffic, and we saw just a moment ago Dempsey sneaking down the inside. It was a clean moment there for him, but sneaking down the inside of Mr. Alex Jacobson, the leader in GT3, it's still tough. It's still technical to make those decisions at such high speed like we have in these prototype categories. When to make that decision, let a guy by, when to not. And I know you're not really fighting for anything if you're Jacobson right now in terms of giving up track position. You have a little bit of wiggle room, but the wrong miscommunication at the wrong time, this race can get out of hand very quickly. This is not mental brain turn off at all for anybody in this series. That's what makes multi-class racing so fun.
Absolutely, and like you said, for the slower class drivers, it's up to them almost as much as it is the faster class cars of dictating when and where to have the pass done for those blue flags to be satisfied. And so, to your point, if you're placing your car in a wrong manner or diving off the line to try and be courteous, but the prototype guy behind you is not expecting it, that could spell disaster for both drivers in a hurry. And next thing you know, for somebody like Brock Morris, who's got a 3.7 second lead, that race is over. That lead gone. And so all it takes is just one small mental miscue, and the race changes in a hurry. As speaking of race changes in a hurry, Broughton Jones is currently in pit lane having a meatball flag that he's having to serve.
Oh my goodness, very close re-entry there to the racetrack for P3, now P4 in class, Eduardo Salles, who we showed just a moment ago how close he was to Jenkins and Morris, that battle for the lead. He spins in that low-speed final turn to the lap, the left-hander at the end of the final chicane.
Yeah, and speaking of mental miscues there, that was almost one from Salas as he went to go gun the gas in a moment of haste trying to get his race going right again, and almost collects the Aston Martin and a prototype there with the awkward rejoin.
And then passes him right back a moment later. That's the brutality of GTP versus GT3.
Absolutely, and if you're in the Aston Martin, you're going, hey man, what the heck? as the guy passes you right back after he almost just ended your race. But as you said, that is the dynamic of multi-class, both the good and the bad. But like we were just talking about, one small mental miscue can spell disaster for not just yourself, but other drivers as well.
Do you know who's loving that series of events? Mr. Evan Gilmet now sits in P3, Portland, Connecticut's own, not Portland, Oregon. Don't get them confused. We often, this is a thing, Brian, that we often like to point out, just because, I don't know about you, I didn't know there was a third major Portland.
I was just about to say, I've never heard of Portland, Connecticut before, so consider myself learned tonight. I've learned something. My mother will be proud of me. But speaking of loving things, Brandon Anderson, after that pit stop that it was almost 2 seconds gap, he has run down Maicon Gazzoni. And that gap down to less than 0.4 of a second, and they've got traffic in the mix as well, as you see the headlight flash from Brandon Anderson working their way down to Eau Rouge and Radion. He clears the GT traffic, nothing doing, and he's going to make advantage of the draft as best he can. Going to be interested to see, since you said it is open setup, to see which car is running the lower downforce between these two LMP2 cars. Roughly spec machines, all things considered here. Doesn't look like Brandon's able to close up much in the drafts there, so I happen to suspect he might have a click or two additional rear wing on the back of his LMP2, but that's going to give him an advantage as they work their way into the twisty bits of a lap around Spa here.
Yeah, and a huge other element of that setup too isn't just pure pace, isn't just pure skill in certain parts of the racetrack. Speaking of certain parts of the racetrack having pure skill, last time by, new fastest lap of the race by Anthony Jenkins, running a 2:03.01 second lap. See there, that's the fastest on the racetrack. Brock Morris in P2. Evan Gilmet, we just talked about there, running P3. He's P3 last time by. Best laps of the race, there it is, that 2:03.01. Gilmet, Salles, and Brock Morris actually fourth in the best lap category here tonight. Your race leader, still a very impressive 2:03.44. He's only behind by 0.4, but that is a pretty quick bit of lap time himself. But so my point there about the different setups there, it's not just in lap time, but also in tire management. That's a thing you got to consider. These cars that are really trimmed out for that high speed down the straightaways, well, you're going to lose something there through the midsection of the corner. And again, I said it earlier, high lateral load corners. That's really tough on tires. You wear one side out much faster than the other, and that's going to get even worse if you're running an ultra low downforce setup built for the straightaways. I see here that Brandon Dempsey has gone around, but he's keeping pretty good pace on the racetrack. Yes, he did. He did go around indeed. Look at that back end just step out like it's like a car with no rear wing. That's a prototype Porsche. You don't see that too often, do you, Brian?
No, definitely. I'm not sure if he just had too much rear brake bias dialed into the back of his 963 Porsche there, or if he was trying to do a reverse entry into the La Source hairpin. But either way, he keeps the car clean and recovers. Thankfully, no flat spotting in iRacing, so not really much damage done to the tires either. But Brandon Anderson, he's worked his way around Maicon Gazzoni for the lead in P2, and Gazzoni, he's wanting to take that right back as they're side-by-side going down into the Lecum brake zone. Anderson thinks the better of it, remembering this is a 90-minute race, and there's still 55 minutes left on the clock. He gives that up and says, I'll come back at you at a later point.
Yes, indeed. 55 minutes left on the clock for round 5 of the FMA Prototype Challenge Series, the endurance race here at Spa-Francorchamps with the special triple class night with the GT3s making their debut here on Thursday nights as Jay Davis has gone around as well on that all technical, all crucial turn 1. He was chasing down the man who had just done it a moment ago himself, Brandon Dempsey. Let's see what happens here to the number 317 of Jay Davis. Same thing, back end steps out. He carried a little bit extra speed in there just from the eyeball test, but I don't think he got on the outside grass. That was my theory for a couple of these drivers, because if there is a car on this surface you do not want to hit a patch of grass on corner entry in, it is the GTP. The GT3s can sometimes get away with it, as we see Gustavo Ferraro there going back and forth with Anthony Jenkins, currently P2 in the GTP class, but GTPs can't get away with something like that. The GT3s can, as, oh my goodness, Jenkins is fighting tooth and nail here as Gustavo Ferraro, credit to him, he just outbraked a GTP car into a medium speed corner. That was something that cool for us. Going to be infuriating for Jenkins, who'd been catching Brock Morris, is losing about a second per sector here as he sits behind Ferraro, finally gets by.
Absolutely infuriating moment there for Jenkins, as he's going to be extremely frustrated. And we were talking about traffic management of the slower class cars, but we haven't really touched on just how similar in pace an LMP2 car and a GTP car are in some of these slow and medium speed corners, was just demonstrated right there. And especially if you have a certain type of driver in an LMP2 car that wants to make life difficult for a GTP driver, they can certainly do so. They have the equipment to do it. Whether it's right or wrong, you can debate that in the comment section, but for Jenkins, for sure, he was wishing that exchange did not happen and did not have to lose that amount of ground to Brock Morris that he was trying to run down there.
Just keeping an eye here at one of our closest battle on the racetrack aside from that battle for the LMP2 lead. This is Ignacio Arroyo versus Gustavo Ferraro now for P4 in the LMP2 class. I'm still keeping an eye. It's always so stressful as a producer when you get a battle this close, like between Gazzoni and Anderson. You're always like, all right, the pass could be at any moment. You don't want to miss it. But it is so hard to tell with how close they run the entire lap. Keeping an eye here for some of the drivers we haven't talked about too much tonight that are a little bit further back in the order. Aaron Sanford, the 958 car, the Crownsville, Maryland native, did not start tonight's race. Looking at Robert Milbrath here as well, who I, for whatever reason, cannot find on the racetrack, so we're going to pop somewhere else. A couple of these drivers not currently active. Christopher Pugliese is, though, driving the number 420 car, the number 420 LMP2, running the Spider-Man livery. You got to think for him, he's Erie, Pennsylvania, so there you go. He's, you could say, far from home. You could say it's, when we go back later in the calendar to some of the American tracks, he'll be having a homecoming. You could...
good references.
You got to
Very
wonder,
nice.
is this an amazing situation? Is it an Amazing Spider-Man 2 situation? I'm running a Supreme Spider-Man? Superior Spider-Man? Is that anything?
I mean, he's wishing for a brand new day. I can tell you that
Nice.
much, sitting down in where he's sitting. But as things progress, we'll certainly be hoping to improve his track position. And speaking of improving track position, Gazzoni has reclaimed P1 a couple laps ago and been able to hold on to it, holding off the fast and fierce challenge of Brandon Anderson behind him, but Anderson, having lagged back a little bit after the pass was done into Lake Kuma a couple laps ago, is back on the attack. See Gazzoni just pull out a little bit on the run down to Eau Rouge and up Radion, but that gap closes back with the long run down the Kemmel straightaway to Lake Kuma, as you'll see here in a moment. Anderson a little bit too far back to try and make a move, but he will close up in the brake zone, and as they work their way through the Sector 2, we'll look to try and make a pass somewhere, perhaps down into the double left-hander of Puhan.
I find it so cool that we get a visor cam there from Brandon Anderson down the bottom right corner of your screen. You actually see eyeball exactly what he's looking at. You see the head turn, and it really gets you a sense of just how technical this racetrack is. And then you add on the dirty air component. He's driving right behind another LMP2 car. These LMP2s, jumpy back ends. This is a technical, hard track. But what you got to respect, in addition to the fact he's got that LED gear indicator up there in the top left, that thing is sick, and I want one. But his hands, so steady, so smooth through the corners. You see the little micro adjustments. He's making those little tiny corrections to his steering entry angle. But generally speaking, he's keeping his hands soft, is right there, getting real close up to the back end of Maicon Gazzoni. But that's going to be something to keep an eye on there, is drivers, who's burning up the tires, and that is a huge way to tell us how much steering angle you're putting into the wheel. Speaking of here, as we go back a little bit further up the grid, all the way to the very front, once again, last time by, Jenkins was faster. We talked about a few moments ago, Jenkins getting held up by lap traffic. Shout out Brandon Dempsey here, by the way, currently sitting P6, fastest lap of anybody last time by. But to the lead battle, last time by, full second faster was Jenkins, and that's been the pattern. You talk about lap traffic, that could be a factor here, as I believe you see a lap car that might be holding up Brock Morris. But in addition, tire wear, something we got to wonder as we get close to our second pit stop of the day. Is that something that may be going the way of Anthony Jenkins?
Yeah, absolutely. After getting held up by the LMP2 car, that gap was about 2.8 seconds, and now it's right around a second, give or take, depending on if they're entering or exiting a corner. And as they start closing in on our top runners in LMP2, that task of getting around them is going to be harder and harder as the LMP2 drivers have the pace, plus you factor in the battle that Gazzoni and Anderson are fighting right now as well. That's going to be a tough challenge for Morris and Jenkins to get by, as they've basically got the battle to focus on between themselves. They've dropped Evan Guimet to the tune of 14 seconds after Eduardo Salas had his moment and dropped him out of P3 down to P4, but Salas has recovered. He's only about 1.4 seconds back to Guimet. As we see Gustavo Ferreira come in and make his pit stop, the South Jordan driver in the number 777.
We love Gustavo Ferraro here on Thursday nights. He does quite a few interviews. Some of his Vortex Racing teammates, not native English speakers, so often Gustavo will do the translation, and he's such a fun character. We love having him in the booth, and he's been on the podium a couple of times this year, quite successfully in the LMP2. Speaking of the LMP2, speaking of near the battle for the podium, this is the battle for P4 in the second of our three classes. Decio Lima leads Ignacio Arroyo, one of two teammates there in the LMP2 chapter of Threshold Performance, the other being our currently P3 sitter, and a guy with some support there in the YouTube chat, Mr. Jeremy Eshelman. Again, shame for whatever reason his livery is not displaying as the black, red, and gold scheme, but again, imagine it in your head, viewers out there. I want you to picture that scheme on current third place Jeremy Eshelman, who's running quite well right now. Keep an eye on the pace of that driver in P3. Right now, though, his teammate Arroyo may get the benefit here of some lap traffic, and that is Jacobson. That's your leader in GT3. I talked about it before. It's nothing to fight for in terms of pace, but as you can see, diving up the inside a little bit there a moment ago was Lima. He's got to be careful, Jacobson. He cannot let these battles going on behind him in LMP2 result in an accidental incident, as Gazzoni now enters pit road from P2 in LMP2.
Yeah, absolutely. For Jacobson, not only does he have the LMP2 cars working through, but he's got GTPs working through both classes of cars there, and that could easily spell trouble with the speed difference, especially coming down this long straightaway as they work their way to the bus stop braking zone. And so for Jacobson, he's going to try and get out of the way, but he can't just disappear, which I'm sure he's screaming in his head to the prototype drivers like, hey, I'm here. I'm trying to get out of the way, but I can only do so much. And there was some dicey moves that I saw on my cameras from a couple of the GTP drivers, but everybody keeps going in the correct direction. No bodywork came flying off, and everybody gets to fight for another lap. But That's just the nature of being a GT3 car in a multi-class race. You're not only fighting for survival against one class, but against two classes.
Here we go, down the long front stretch up towards turn number 4. Arroyo, he's in the slipstream. He's got a good run here. Does he peak left? No, he peaks right. Gonna try the inside, and he gives it to him. He will get the inside on Lima, but they're gonna hold side by side, and Lima holds strong around the outside there on corner entry. Exceptional job by the Brazilian to hold off P number 3 in that position. Now this battle promotes to the 3rd spot on the podium, thanks to the pit stop of my son Gizzoni there, teammate of Decio Lima with Vortex Racing. But this battle is heating up just as another heats up. Front of the field, Brock Morris, and there is Anthony Jenkins.
Yeah, and I just want to touch on real quick, Gizzoni came into the pits by himself, and if you remember during the first pit stop, all of the LMP2s fit together, so maybe starting to see some strategies starting to develop and differences in strategy, and we'll see how that plays out as the rest of the LMP2 class cycles through their pit stops. But for Lima and Arroyo working through Lake Coombe, that's one of my favorite sections of Spa, and it really allows for both lines to have their advantages and disadvantages as it crosses from right to left and back to right again. As we see Brandon Anderson, the LMP2 leader, he's going to pit a lap later than Mike Kahn did. Anthony Jenkins, he's pitting a lap earlier than Brock Morris, maybe trying to undercut this go around for these pit stop cycles.
Well, you know sports cars well, Brian. I'm going to defer to you on this one. I've never personally had the honor. I don't think I have run a GTP here at Spa. I'm not super familiar with the situation in the real world. The tire heat-up phase here in these GTP cars, do you think it is a true undercut here at Spa? Because we talk about you got a long 2.5 minutes to have the opportunity to undercut, but you got to warm those tires up. Is it more beneficial, that first out lap on a new set, rather than, you know, Brock Morris here? He's going to run an extra lap on older tires, but they're already heated up. Is that going to potentially spell a lesser undercut than we'd see otherwise?
I think it would. I think the undercut would be more heavily favorable if we had a lot of traffic. I think for our GTP leaders, having just worked their way through traffic, it doesn't quite benefit as much. And so for somebody like Brock Morris to stay out, you know, he may be trying to do a push lap. You know, if you think back to Michael Schumacher, he was always famous for doing those qualifying laps when it was getting close to pit stop time. You know, you would have the call out come over the radio to say, okay, it's qualifying time, and he would just nail those in laps. And so for Brock Morris, he might be trying to emulate the same kind of strategy there over Anthony Jenkins. But for Jenkins, he's going to have hot tires at the time that Morris comes out of the pits, assuming that Morris does change his tires. And this is where it gets into where we were talking about earlier in the race, that strategy call of, do you even change tires? You know, what's your tire wear around a place like this where, you know, yes, it is a very abrasive track, but if the track temps are cool enough, you can get away with double stinting the tires, especially with these short fuel pit stops that they're having with the 55% gap.
Oh, look into the outside, Salas. Oh my goodness, he managed to make the corner, and they both pit. You'll love to see that. One of the best, you know, side-by-sides we've seen all day, and it's all for naught. They're going down pit road anyway. That's why I love racing here in this series. Gilmet, Salas, and Ibrahim, your top, your 2, 3, 4 here in GTP. 2 of that pair are going to pit, as well as, again, keep an eye, Jeremy Eshelman became your leader here. The Greensburg, Pennsylvania native became the leader here in LMP2 this last time by staying out an extra lap. And so did Brock Morris. He's led this thing from flag to flag, but where does Jenkins cycle out? And keep an eye, because Jenkins, the 732, will have hot tires as he exits the pits, give or take. Going to be about, well, with the run down the straightaway, probably going to cycle at about 2.5 seconds behind your race leader.
Yeah, but the gap is going to close substantially as Morris is not able to take Eau Rouge flat out on those cold tires the way that Jenkins is, and you can see that reflected in the timing tower up there as that gap is tumbling down 2.1 seconds now as they get into the brake zone. And so for Morris, he's going to spend half a lap going through these tight corners trying to get heat in the tires. And Jenkins, he's going to be on attack mode, already having his tires up to temperature, up to pressure. He knows that Morris just came out of the pits, so he's going to be pushing a little bit extra as well to try and get that gap down as close as he can by the end of this lap, and before, as We see Dacio Lima having a moment going into the bus stop, just carried too much speed there, and clutch dumps to get the car flipped around there. Nicely done from the 119 driver.
That was a pretty nifty save. I was just thinking that. I was like, wow, that's one of the faster flick turns I've seen in a while. We talk about the hot tires. Here he is, Jenkins. That gap is right where it was pre-pit stop. Now down to half a second. Even the littlest bit of hot tire advantage could benefit Jenkins. And the way we've seen this race, it tracks with Spa. The lot of high-speed corners where dirty air makes a huge difference. This could be incredibly costly for a guy like Morris to lose the lead that he's controlled so well. If Jenkins could persevere here in this battle for the GTP lead, as further back Arroyo goes off the racetrack in LMP2, he'll drop a spot to P5. This battle could eventually spell the race 41 minutes early. Looking to the inside. We're still together through the slow speed. Can he cross him over? No, he holds steady on the outside. He's going to wait, and I think that's the right move, Brian, because we know he's going to have another shot through Radion down the straightaway.
Yeah, absolutely. Jenkins is going to get himself in a position here, exiting La Source, to take advantage of the draft all the way down Eau Rouge, up Radion, and down the Cam straightaway. And he's going to look to try and make a move, I imagine, into Lake Coombe this time by, as he knows now Morris has got his tires up to temperature. That was his best moment to try and get a job done, but attempted it, just couldn't get it fully executed, as there was excellent, respectful driving there between Morris and Jenkins through the bus stop side by side. And that's what we've come to expect from these two drivers all season long, isn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is. That's a lap car there. That we see lap traffic once again going to play a role. That GT3 Aston Martin parking the bus right in front of our GTP leaders. This is a huge moment for Jenkins, who didn't get a great run there through turn 4. This is going to punch the field up even closer. As this continues, Eduardo Salles has been black flagged. He'll have to serve a drive-through pit stop here due to an infraction. I'm going to guess off track limits, as we potentially see him take one right there as we cut over. So the Vortex Racing lead driver there, the only Vortex Racing GTP entry of Eduardo Salles. That is going to be huge for a race that right now looked like it had podium written all over it. He's running faster than Evan Gilmet, who sits in P3, and he's run great all season. This could be a huge opportunity for Evan Gilmet to get a little bit of distance here to the end of the podium. But we cut back because we have to keep an eye. Jenkins versus Morris. What does Brock Morris have in the tank there? He knows a battle. He's held off many a good driver from the lead in an FMA series, including myself. I've been the victim of this guy's defensive strategy many a time, so we'll see what Brock has in him. But again, I hope I'm not overstating it. I think you'd agree with me, Brian. 40 minutes left to go in this race, but a pass here, if Jenkins is that much faster in the clean air, could be the end of this race.
Yeah, we got to figure that there's at least one more pit stop coming, whether it's a full service or a short pit stop. We don't know. That's all going to be dependent on time. But for Brock Morris, he's knowing that he's got one lap fresher tires than Anthony Jenkins behind him, so he's doing everything he can to defend and hold station in the lead of this race, knowing that the tires will come back to him over the length of this stint, as Anthony Jenkins would have been pushing hard, using a little bit more life out of those tires. And Jenkins, he's going to push hard and try and get Morris to use up his tires just as much and try and level that playing field between the two sets of Cadillacs at the moment, and try and negate that one lap advantage of the tires that currently is in favor of Brock Morris.
You see there on the bottom right of your screen, lap leaders tonight, 24 for 24 so far for Brock Morris at the lead of GTP. I know I did some quick math earlier. I'll tell you, certainly fans watching at home, that is 100% of the race laps he has led tonight in GTP has Brock Morris. Meanwhile, Gizzoni and Anderson, they've gone back and forth quite a bit there in LMP2. That number would look quite different for those two gentlemen. But in the GT3 class, as Sellers exits pit road there after serving his penalty, comes out P5, way down the grid of the next driver up in the order. That is, if my math is right, about 2.5 seconds he now sits ahead of, or pardon me, behind Brandon Dempsey. So still in play there for P4. I was trying to allude to him, though. It's been a quiet night for him. We haven't talked much about him because he hasn't been involved in too much. Shout out to Alex Jacobson. Continues to run a strong race, still pumping in good lap times. And the endurance of this, you know, it does become more of a mental game at this point. All right, I haven't seen many people. I haven't had to battle much. But you can't let yourself take a mental day off, because technical racetrack, tough track. That car on old tires is going to be rough to wrestle around this track, even by itself.
Absolutely, and for Alex, even though he may not have had direct competition in class, he has certainly had his fair share of run-ins with the faster traffic from the LMP2 and the GTP class. So he's had to be on his toes a few times throughout the race so far, but has survived each encounter so far, and I'm sure he will hope to continue that trend as they will lap him probably a couple more times in the remaining 36 minutes of this race. But lapping, speaking of lapping, Anthony Jenkins is lapping faster than Brock Morris at the moment, and he has closed that gap down and is maintaining that close gap, sitting about half a second back off the rear of Brock Morris's Cadillac. I'm sure he's getting tired of staring at the back end of it, though, and wants to change up the scenery and make Brock stare at the back of Anthony's Cadillac if he can.
I think that graphic on the bottom right of your screen might be my favorite piece of data we can show. Fastest 5 over the last 5. That's the average lap time in the last 5 laps for these GTP drivers. Eduardo Salas at the lead of that list. He is going to drop off it, though. He hasn't pitted in the last 5. That's what has that number warped a little bit there. Jenkins, though, your leader, 2:11.81 in the last 5 since the pit stop, and including the pit stop. Brock Morris, 2:11.96, and then you see that big gap back to shout out Brandon Dempsey, a guy who is still coming through the field, has time, has opportunity to catch up to Evan Gilmet before this race is over, as Gilmet briefly shown a yellow flag there for some sort of moment. He looks like he's all right there running in P3, but that tells the story there for you, doesn't it? That including the pit cycle, Jenkins has found something in the second stanza of this race, and I really want to reiterate this. It's awesome to have. It's been a great time so far with you tonight, Brian. But your first race here on Thursday in FMA GT or Prototype Challenge. This is often how it goes. You see now in your interval, everything's kind of spreading out. Not too many close battles on track for the moment. That will change. But the only battle for the racetrack that is less than a second is the one for the lead in GTP. This feels like how it goes every week between Morris and Jenkins. It is clockwork that these two gentlemen find their way to the top of the order. And again, less than 10 points separates them for the lead in that class. We're only halfway through the season here in Prototype Challenge, but battles like this at any point can make the difference in any form of racing, but especially when you got such a great championship battle like these two.
Yeah, I think it's easy to see why these two are the top two in the championship. They've traded blows, race in and race out through, what is this, week 5 of the championship. And so I think this is a great summation of how the championship has gone so far. Of course, being my first night exposed to it, it's been fantastic to see. I certainly love Prototype League racing. I think it's some of the best action that you can find on the service, and Morris and Jenkins are definitely exemplary of those situations.
Well, Jenkins continues to hold the gap at that number. We're going to take a look here. Let's do a through the field here, through the various classes in tonight's race. We're going to look at the top 5 in each of our categories. We're going to do an abbreviated top 5 when we get to GT3 because there are 5 of them and one of them is out of the race. But let's kick it off here. It feels like a fitting time to take a look here at Brock Morris, your race leader. He's led this thing flag to flag, 24 laps, now 25. Perfect race so far with 33 minutes to go. He's done well with the extra time here, and if this race were 60 minutes, he'd be squaring up for a final fight to the finish. And the guy chasing him down here for said fight, Anthony Jenkins, Tampa, Florida's own, currently runs in P2. He started on the lead of the field. He was your pole sitter, and he's since dropped back in all crucial 7/10. He continues to fight Brock for the race lead. P3, Evan Gilmet, the number 68 car, Portland, Connecticut's own, a guy that we've seen intermittently throughout the night. He runs really good lap times towards the end of stints, and right now he's doing so en route to 12-second advantage to P4 that he holds that final podium spot. He's had a great race for himself here, Evan Gilmet in the Porsche. Now we see Brandon Dempsey, P4, in tonight's race. He started up in the 6th position. He's worked his way even further forward, running really well right now. Continues to sit in the mid-203s. He had a bit of a spin like a couple drivers did in the first turn of the race earlier tonight, but he's recovered well, and he currently rounds off your top 4. And rounding off the top 5, it's a guy getting a little bit of support there in the YouTube chat. Shout out to the Vortex Racing fans. Eduardo Salas. The pace has been there. We've seen that plenty tonight, Brian. But now he finds himself back there in P5, trying to chase his way back through the field after another incident in the final turn of the race. Another corner that's given some guys some trouble. And we'll have you there if you can, Brian. Run us through the LMP2 top 5.
Yeah, Maicon Ghizzoni is currently holding P1. He's probably been the predominant leader of the race so far in LMP2. He's had to fend off Brandon Anderson several times throughout the race, but he's currently stretched that lead to about 3 seconds now through the pit stop and traffic as well. And Brandon Anderson, he's trying to run down Maicon Ghizzoni in P1. He's currently sitting P2, started I think he was the pole sitter, if I remember correctly, but
That's right, yeah.
has dropped down to second place. But Jeremy Eshelman, he's sitting there licking his chops. If anything were to happen to the top two, he's been consistently third all race long. And even though the paint isn't loading, I still think that highlighter green is a great color on that car. But kind of running a quiet race. And Decio Lima, we saw him in a battle earlier on, leading into the second round of pit stops. He's fallen back a little bit from Jeremy Eshelman, but conversely has a huge lead over Gustavo Ferrano and is holding P4. And his teammate Ferrero in the 777 is sitting about 30 plus seconds back, but solidly in P5. He's got couple seconds gap over Ignacio Arroyo, rounding out your top 5 in LMP2.
And again, we'll do that abridged run through the GT3 class tonight. Quiet but dominant performance tonight for Alex Jacobson. He leads the GT3 class. I would nominate for a guy that runs in Pro-Am on Mondays. He's had the pretty smooth run of this one in his one-off appearance as the GT3s come here onto Thursday nights. Maybe a promotion in order, mid-season promotion. Put Jacobson up there in the pro class with guys like me. I'm just spitballing here, but he should round off that championship. He's did so well on Mondays. He's doing well here on Thursday. Has led this thing pretty much flag to flag. GT3 P2 right now. Matt Mars jumping down from the GTP class to fill out the ranks here in GT3. And again, he was darn fast this past week at Monza, another high-speed FIA Grade 1 circuit. And the Loboville, Tennessee native is bringing that speed here to Thursday. He's run quite well. That gap, 23 seconds up there to Jacobson, but he's running strong lap times, and every once in a while, he'll work that gap down a little bit on Jacobson. Strong run here for Matt Mars. And Zach Tankersley going to round off your top 3 here tonight, running another guy that his usual Mach 10 Motorsports delivery not here tonight, but he's got a nice blue, red, and white, doing a bit of an early 4th of July America tribute there. He is the final driver here in the top 3. My teammate in FMA GT3, Iron Horse Motorsports teammate on Mondays, Mr. Anthony Barranco. It's been a tough one for him. He was the pole sitter tonight, but since then, early incident we saw coming out of Radion, had a bit of a moment, and has since dropped down the order. He sits a fair ways back there of race leader Jacobson, over 2 minutes behind. But, you know, for me, that says, hey, he's ready to shift gears mentally. He's already got his head up into next week's race, and us Iron Horse Motorsports guys next Monday. Looking forward to a good performance. So that's your field as we jump back a few seconds on the racetrack. Brock Morris will continue to lead into the final half hour of this race, now down to 29 minutes. And that final pit stop, if my math earlier was correct, you should see it somewhere around the 23-minute mark. This race has still got plenty left to run. And you want to know how I know that? Fastest lap of the race last time by Anthony Jenkins, 202.68.
Yeah, 202.6 from Jenkins is absolutely flying around here, but credit to Brock Morris. He's not much slower, only a 10th, actually. We say that, and he goes and resets the fastest lap. He must have heard us talking about it and said, nope, I don't like Jenkins having that honor. I'm going to take it back from him as he runs 3/10 faster than Jenkins had. He puts in a 202.59. That is screaming around here. As you can tell, the fuel has burned off of these Cadillac GTPs, and they are flying.
Big moment there for Jenkins. He got stuck behind Barranco in the GT3 Mustang up the hill through Eau Rouge. That lost him a bunch of time. That looked like the inverse of what we saw earlier there, coming out of the pits with the hot tires. That gap dropped like a stone for Jenkins. He's now down almost 2.3 seconds behind Morris there. And again, with how close that gap is, you think there, Brian, how many laps he had to claw to get 2 seconds out of the gap to Brock. You lose a second in a little moment like that with a GT3. That's why multi-class racing can be so tough when the gaps in pace are so small.
Absolutely. When you've got two evenly matched drivers the way that Morris and Jenkins are, it takes forever to gain time. And it takes nothing at all to lose it all back, as you just saw there. And you know, that's just the reality of it. And I certainly sympathize with Jenkins. I've had my fair share of just rotten luck when it comes to traffic, catching it in all the wrong places, and there's just nothing you can do about it. You know, the alternative is you drive through a guy, you wreck your race car, and that's just no fun, and that's not what you want either. So unfortunately, you have to bite the bullet and give up a few tenths of a second or a second at the most. But just like that, though, you look at the gap; he's already gained half a second back. So Jenkins, he's got the bit in his teeth, and he's running hard to try and catch Brock.
Bit of a moment here for Zach Tankersley as he attempts to enter pit road, goes long into the final low-speed right-hander. Luckily, he keeps it on the racetrack and gets into pit road without issue. Let's see here, Gustavo Ferraro entering pit road alongside the GT3 Aston of Tankersley. It's going to be cutting it close here. What's that, 26 minutes left in this race for Ferraro? That's on the edge of what we've seen guys be able to do here on fuel. At this point, he's currently running P7. I believe he entered pit road in P6. I think at this point, the best interest, the prerogative there for Ferraro has to just be, all right, go out there, do a little bit of lift and coast where necessary, a little bit where you can find time, and hope whatever you can do to limit that 30-second-ish damage you'll take from just coming in, doing a quick splash of fuel, and losing some tire temperature in the process as well. It's one of those things. I know as a driver, you feel so helpless, you feel so slow when you're lift and coasting, when you're fuel saving. But you think about how long some of the pit cycles are at some of these racetracks. It is always better if you can help it to try to do it with the gas pedal rather than with the gas can.
Absolutely. I did a official Long Beach IMSA race last night and actually no-stopped that race from fuel saving.
Wow.
Unfortunately, the guys in front of me were better and faster at it, so I at least had the fuel save down. I just didn't have the outright pace figured out yet. But yeah, Spa is a great track to learn and practice fuel saving if you've never done it before. And as we see some more callers down pit lane, Brandon Anderson, who we're currently on board with that wonderful driver's eye cam. You pointed that out earlier in the race, and man, that is just a setup to envy right there. That is fantastic to look at. And as we see the 147 behind him as well, so it'll be interesting to see with Maicon Gazzoni and Brandon Anderson both in pit lane. That gap looks to have closed a little bit just on the eyeball test from what it was entering pit lane. So Brandon might have had a little bit better of pit in there as Jeremy Eshelman. He's going to go a lap longer. I wonder if that's going to pay dividends for him, though. But for Gazzoni and Anderson, they're going to be on hot tires when Eshelman does pit.
This is a moment ago with Gustavo Ferraro. Very off the pace here. I don't know what's gone on there for the 777 car, but just peels off the racetrack, heads to the pits. He's calling it quits here prematurely. A driver that has done pretty well for finishes this season, pretty consistently, not having too many issues that lose him race position. Speaking of, Brandon Anderson, he's been in that battle for the lead in LMP2 all the way. A mistake, uncharacteristically, from the 007 car, and look at the ham moving out of pit road. You see the frustration on the driver's eye. That is cold tires coming to bite a guy late in the race, and that's why we talk about these things are never over until they're over.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a frustrating mistake, I'm sure. Probably cold tires, as you said. We'll get a replay here. Breaking down into Lake Coombe. Gets on that left side curb, takes too much speed into it, and the back end just gives up. That's definitely a cold tire moment, but frustrating nonetheless for Brandon Anderson as he's going to back up to get out of traffic and be able to get going. Close moment there with Dacio coming through, but doesn't collect him. Both cars are able to continue, but definitely frustrating for Brandon Anderson, who has been fighting and trying everything he can to run down Gazzoni, and to just have a simple cold tire mistake take you out of competition is going to be extremely frustrating for the 001 driver.
Well, do you know who's loving that is Aber2183 there in the YouTube chat. He was earlier today was cheering for Jeremy Eshelman. He was saying, oh, Jeremy's got this one in the bag. And even though we started a little bit further down the field, I say that, he started P2. But even though he spent a lot of the racing a little bit further back in the order in the LMP2 class, that's exactly what he did in the season opener at Daytona. He started that race from the back of the field due to a quality mistake, worked his way through and through and through, and he won that race by a fair chunk of time. Now he's got an opportunity to do the same, and he's trying the overcut you talked about. We said it would be 1 lap. He's now gone an extra lap. So Jeremy,
I was just going to say, yeah, he's really gone pushed 2 laps around.
So it's going to be interesting. If he can make it around on fuel, shorter pit stop, 2 laps of fuel is a long time in pit road here at Spa. So that's going to be a huge advantage for him. Eshelman could bring this one home, could claw victory from the jaws of defeat in a race that he never really seemed to be in play. And now here's an interesting situation here. We talked about it earlier. Well, that was really cool that we saw it was the undercut. It was the undercut from Jenkins. He comes out of pit road, hotter tires than Morris, who's exiting pit road himself, and he almost pips him for the race lead. Now, Jenkins is the first one down pit road. And we've seen that a couple times here tonight, Brian. Uncharacteristic that the driver who comes into pit road is the leader over somebody else on one pit stop. Well, the pit stop later, it flips around the other way. Really weird situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll have to see if it plays out similar to how it did the previous go-around. But Jenkins, you saw go up on the jack stand, so he took full service. So he's going to be navigating cold tires now. As he's got Eduardo Salas behind him. Salas, I believe, has pit already for his final time. I could
He is
be
not.
wrong
He's
on
got
that.
one more to do.
Okay, so this is a hot tire versus cold tire moment. As you saw Jenkins there, he had a shortcut like whom. He had a cold tire moment. Might have been a lockup there. He slowed down, has been cleared there, but has to let Salas go, knowing that Salas still needs to come into the pits. But that's going to be time lost, and that's going to hand the advantage to Morris, assuming that Morris is able to come in, have a clean pit stop, and a clean out lap. So I'm not expecting that gap to be as close as it was during the previous pit stop, as we're looking at a replay of a moment that Ryan Peters has had.
And the back end on some of these GTP cars tonight, it looks treacherous.
Absolutely. It's just really easy to lock up the rear of these cars. No ABS, as I said earlier, and if you just get the brake bias a little bit wrong, it's easy to swap ends. As the aforementioned Brock Morris comes into the pits, don't know if he knew of the mistake that Anthony Jenkins had or if he was just at the end of his fuel load. As now we watch and see what that gap is going to be like with all things factored in.
Let's keep an eye here as Evan Gilmet could appeal down pit road as well. He's quietly had a great night for himself as well. I know we've talked plenty about that battle at the top of GTP between Morris and Jenkins. Salas likely going to take his pit service here, which will promote Jenkins back into P2, maybe even P1. We'll see where he factors out. He's exiting the final corner of the racetrack right now. Where's Brock Morris? He's exiting pit road now. I think it's going to go the way of Morris again. Where is Jenkins? He's not even on entry to the final corner. I think that is net gain for Brock Morris. The question, though, is we're going to see the outlap pit lane time. No, it was identical for both drivers. Brock Morris did sit in pit lane the exact same amount of time. In fact, he was just 2/10 slower in the box was Brock Morris than Jenkins, but he made up all this time. That gap now up to 8 seconds. So does it make sense that tires would be different? I think both guys probably take 4 or 2. Is that race over? Do you think Jenkins has 8 seconds he can find him?
I don't know. It's going to be a tall order. Unfortunately for Jenkins, he had that cold tire moment while in traffic going through Lake Coombe, and that's, I think, the tail of the tape right there between Morris and Jenkins. And for a gap that has been very small all race long, this is the biggest it's been, and I don't know if Jenkins is going to have the outright pace to run down Morris to the tune of 7.9 seconds over 18 minutes to go, but we're certainly going to find out. This has certainly been a excellent race, but lately turned a little bit uncharacteristic for our 2 GTP leaders. As we see Brandon Dempsey, he's had a quiet race, a little bit of a recovery effort from earlier misfortune at the start of the race, but he's put in some very fast laps himself.
I like that his wall in the background of his cam there matches his race car. I'm sure not intentional. Just, white's a pretty common color, but I like it. He's got a bit of a color profile going on here in the same way that, Mr. Brandon Anderson, who we'll keep an eye on here, he's back to P3. He's back in a podium position after his earlier incident there in turn number 4, where the white kind of monotone simplicity, the beauty of Brandon Dempsey's setup is met with the 4th of July colorful wonderland of Brandon Anderson. I honestly, I don't know about you, Brian. I could just sit on this camera and just watch Brandon Anderson set up here the entire race. That thing with the eyeball camera. You know, you got to go to Fox. You got to have these multi-million-dollar production budgets to get an eyeball camera. Brandon Anderson has one for us here in FMA GT prototypes on Thursday nights. He's really bringing some premiumization to our product here, isn't he?
Absolutely. Brandon Anderson's got a setup that I aspire to have, and kudos to him for building that and hooking up his camera for us to be able to watch. And he should definitely start thinking about making some content to put on a YouTube channel, some driver's eye POV videos. Reminds me one of my favorite videos of all time. There was a driver's eye video that came out, I want to say around 2014, but it was Tommy Milner in the Corvette C7R at Daytona at night. And it's like 20 minutes long, and it's just nothing but just raw audio POV video from inside Milner's helmet, inside the Corvette C7R at Daytona at night. Fantastic video. If you haven't gone and seen it, I highly recommend looking it up and watching it. You will walk away a changed person, I guarantee it.
Yeah, one of my favorites is the old AO Racing when they won Road Atlanta at Petit Le Mans the other year in their IMSA title year. That on board as well. Some of these racetracks, you really get a sense of just how reliant these cars at night races are on their headlights. And I can't remember if we're having a night race here as Eduardo Salas continues to track down Brandon Dempsey, who we just showed a moment ago here for P4 in the GTP class in the late stages of this race. He's flashing the headlights on a car for position, showing a little bit of frustration maybe with some of the braking points for Dempsey as they're going to go side by side here through the sweeping. A long downhill right-hander into the left. Oh my goodness! Around the outside is going to try Salas. Oh my goodness, we got to find it. There he is. Salas does complete the move around the outside. Can you believe it? If he holds this on, I want to make sure he can hold the position here through the rest of the sector. And a second, we're going to have to see that one again because that was a gutsy move by Salas, and he gets it done.
Yeah, absolutely. Salas starting this off with a little bit of razzle-dazzle mental games there, get Brandon off his game and just hanging around the outside of no name. What a bold move there for the Ferrari driver, but makes it stick, takes all the advantage he can from the all-wheel drive system of that number 22 Ferrari, and he is now pulling away with great haste over Brandon Dempsey. You can tell that Dempsey was definitely holding him up, which might have explained partly the headlight flashes from Salas, but could have been a little bit of gamesmanship as well, as you see pro drivers do that as well as they work their way through some P2 and GT3 traffic. But Anthony Jenkins, he's got that gap down to 7.3, 7.4 seconds. He's retaken the top spot on the lap time leaderboard with a 2:02.5. He's pipped Brock Morris by 900 second.
Somebody in the background just went for a bit of an off-track excursion. Sorry about that. I saw Gustavo Ferraro on the back. It was in a wide camera, and when you get the fixed camera perspective, guys flying out of frame looks even crazier. So Gustavo Ferraro goes off, and I'm seeing on my telemetry here, Brandon Anderson had an off-track moment a moment ago. He's still P3 and LMP2.
Yeah, I saw the notification pop up that he came down pit lane again, so I'm not sure what that was about, but having a off-track sand building excursion over there. For Brandon Anderson, it's got to be a story of frustration. His race has come a little bit undone here in the closing stages. He was fighting tooth and nail with Ghizzoni early on in this race to the tune of about 0.5 or 0.6 of a second. They couldn't separate each other any further than that, and now especially after this last pit stop, it's all just come undone. So not sure what's happened to Brandon Anderson, but unfortunate for him. He's still going to potentially claim P3 honors. He's got 4.5 seconds in hand over Decio Lima, who's in P4.
It's so hard to know here with lap traffic versus tire, condition versus pure pace. Jenkins was a second faster last time by than Brock Morris, and the way this is timing out, we have give or take 6 or 7 laps, somewhere in that range left in this race. That cap's now down to 6.2 seconds. I'm curious if this pace is legit, if Jenkins has something in him. It's all in this middle sector, and if Jenkins can continue to run these just dynamite second sectors, maybe I'm just a believer. Maybe it's optimism that we might get another, iconic battle for the win in this series. I don't know. This thing might not be over. Although, right as I say it, Brock Morris. How about you bump that gap back up by a full second? It's so hard to predict at Spa and in Prototype Challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just saw there Anthony Jenkins serving a slowdown. He's pushing hard. He's using every inch of this track that he can find, trying to close that gap down. But I mean, it happens at time. Yeah, there's nothing you can do about it. It's just the way the racing gods dictate your night is going to go. And unfortunately for Jenkins, I'm sure he wants this to be as close of a finish as possible. Was hoping for probably another photo finish, if not an outright win. But credit to Jenkins, though. Just looking at the timing tower, every time he has a mishap or something causes that gap to grow, instantly he's right back on it, and he drops half a second almost immediately. So it's going to be super frustrating, I'm sure, for Anthony if he watches this back or plays it back in his head after the fact to realize just how much pace he probably had in hand over Brock, just sheer outright pace, but unfortunately just couldn't do anything with it tonight.
Keeping an eye throughout the field, I want to take a moment here to shout out Maison Gizzoni, because he's going to likely, if he can keep that gap anywhere near where it is now and he can keep it safe, he will likely come home with the LMP2 win. And for a guy that has joined this series late in the year, one of many Vortex Racing teammates, he has just brought exceptional pace and consistency. He's running so well in races in a way that he's qualifying well. He was P3 today, second row inside lane in the LMP2s, but he has such a consistent pace that when you watch him on the timing tower as an individual, he doesn't really make mistakes. And that's the only thing you could really say. Some of his Vortex Racing teammates have been involved in incidents this year. Tonight, LMP2 is likely only going to have one Vortex Racing driver on it, but in pure pace, probably should have been 2 or 3 of them. But that's the thing. That's why we give so much credit to guys like Gizzoni, and that's why the endurance racing format can often aid guys like Gizzoni, the 147 car, who is done incredibly well to hold off points leader in the LMP2s, Jeremy Eshelman again. Maybe it's a Greensburg tribute green scheme, but more than likely just mission his Threshold Motorsports livery tonight. But what it is, for Eshelman is just going to be okay. These guys are getting faster. There's competition from behind. He's your points leader into this race, and if he holds on to P2, he'll be your points leader out of it. But the question remains, can he hold off that gap for these guys that are finding pace? Because we're only just halfway through this calendar here in Prototype Challenge Thursdays. It could get a lot more interesting than I think Jeremy Eshelman's hoping it will get.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's definitely a critical component these drivers have to manage as the season-long championship, and the same can go for somebody like Anthony Jenkins as well, who, by all accounts, is having an off night compared to how he has done throughout the season. But it's still a championship, and you have to mitigate your bad nights just as much as you celebrate your good nights, and so he's still sitting P2. He's still going to get a decent haul of points, and so it doesn't matter if he's P2 by 600ths of a second or he's P2 by 6 seconds. Not to take liberties with Dom Toretto's famous win by an inch or mile line there, but P2 points is still going to be P2 points. You don't get extra points if you have a photo finish, is what I'm saying. So for Jenkins, who is very much in this title hunt, same with Jeremy Eshelman, it's damage mitigation, and so you have to hope that going into future rounds, Brock Morris or Maison Gizzoni or Brandon Anderson, if you're in Eshelman's shoes, have worse nights than what you may say is a bad night that you're having tonight.
And I'm still keeping an eye. I think with that gap now falling just below 5 seconds there momentarily, likely will get below 5 again into this braking zone. We compare the last lap again. Jenkins has been comfortably about a second faster per lap in this last stint since the pit stop than Brock Morris. The way the math works out is, well, if he can be that much faster per lap, he's going to make up 4 seconds in about 8 minutes. It would time out almost perfectly so that Jenkins would catch. But again, it's the famous, it's one of the oldest sayings in racing, other than to finish first you must finish, whatever the Senate quote is about if you see a gap. But the third most common quote in motorsports is probably, it's one thing to catch him, it's another thing to pass him. That gap's now under 4 seconds here. Jenkins has turned the wick up. He is flying right now, as we saw at Daytona. The question here tonight is going to be, does he have that final pass like he had at Daytona in him? Or is he going to get stuck in the dirty air again? Because we've seen that all night here, Brian. It is so hard to pass late in these GTP cars. And you got to wonder, if this race had ended at the 60-minute mark, when he was like 5/10 behind coming into the half-hour-to-go spot, would he have won that race there? Was he pushing as hard as he would have if that was the finish to this race? And I ask that because he looks like he is going to catch him in time, lap traffic forbidding. Does he have the pass in him? That's the question.
You know, and as you're saying that, I'm sitting here wondering from a different angle if Brock Morris maybe took slightly less fuel in his pit stop to try and get as much of an advantage over Anthony Jenkins, not knowing that Jenkins would have had his cold tire moment, but just trying to, knowing how close it was on the previous pit stop, get that gap as big as it was. Because I was sitting here thinking that 7-8 seconds that gap was when they came out of the pits seemed like an awful lot just for a cold tire slide through the runoff at Lake Coombs. So
Right.
I'm wondering maybe Brock Morris's pace is backed off because he's having to save a little bit of fuel to make it to the end, whereas Anthony Jenkins took enough to push 100% all the way to checkered flag. So you're starting to turn me into a little bit of a believer here in the Anthony Jenkins camp that he might be able to pull this off. We're sitting at just under 6.5 minutes, and that gap has fallen drastically down to just over 3 seconds now. So barring any traffic in inopportune spots, this is going to be a very spicy finish.
And maybe call it PTSD if you want. I just say this all because I've seen it before. He did it at Daytona. He finds that extra little bit out of nowhere in the late stages of this race. Last time by, you don't even see Brock Morris on the graphic for the fastest 5 last time. It is really changing the dynamic of this race. 2:04.6 was Morris's last lap time. 2:02.3, that's 2.3 seconds last time around. We'll see what the gap is here in the late stages. That light coming on, I believe, is the low fuel signal there for Anthony Jenkins, which should be fine with 5.5 minutes to play with. That's close, but he should be all right. Usually iRacing gives it to you maybe 2-3 laps to go in the fuel tank, which here should be plenty. But you make a great point mentioning the fuel aspect, as it's a 2:02.7 for Jenkins, 2:03.4 for Morris. That gap down to 2:07 with 5 minutes 17 to go. But you bring up a great point, and I know it's possible because Brock has done it. He is often. That's what makes him so gosh darn good and so good at defending undercuts. He does take small fuel margins because he's so confident in his numbers and his math. He's a really good strategic driver. But sometimes you do calculate just that little bit too close, and it's a mature thing to do there, if that's the case for him, Brian, to say, okay, we got to save fuel early in the stint to give myself something to fight with should it come down to a battle, rather than, okay, we're going to push, we're going to keep that gap up. And then suddenly you find yourself with a full lap to go with 0.7 of a lap of fuel, and suddenly you're losing this race and not even getting a chance to battle for it. Gap now, 2 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. And for Jenkins, who pit first on that last pit cycle, he's adopted the mentality of, I'm going to put as much fuel into this car as I can that's going to allow me to push 100% all the way to the end of this race. And if it's not enough, tip my hat to the next guy and move on to the next race. But for Jenkins, he's clearly reaping the benefits of that pit stop, even with the mistake that he had on cold tires. That gap now down to 1.7 seconds, 1.6 seconds over behind Brock Morris. And for Morris, he can now see him in the mirror. He knows the threat is real. But I have to wonder if there's anything he can do if he is truly in a fuel management mode. We're going to come down to 3 minutes 50, so call it maybe 2 laps at the line. This is going to be close.
This is going to be great. You gotta be having flashbacks if you're Brock right now. I know I would be. You had this exact race earlier this year at Daytona, and the fact that we have a series so close that in a race that was an hour and a half, 90 minutes of racing, these two start on the same spot on the grid. They were identical at 30 minutes in. They were battling. They were battling within a second at 60 minutes in. And now here at 90, we're going to get another iconic finish to this race. Prototype Challenge is the Brock Morris and Anthony Jenkins in the GTP show every week, I swear. And the sun's going down. The grip level's going to change as this racetrack cools off here at Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. And, well, you know what happens when fuel loads go down there, Brian? You get faster. Fastest lap of the race, once again, now at 2:02.2 from Anthony Jenkins.
Yeah, Jenkins is absolutely flying. I know I've said that a lot, but it truly is descriptive of his pace at the moment. He's just laid down a blistering lap last time by. And I can tell you from being in the driver's seat, it's one thing to only be able to see the guy on the relative box, but when you're able to see him on the track, you just kick into an extra gear. And I think you're seeing that now from Jenkins. He can see Morris in front of him. He can see any little minute slip up from the Cadillac that he is trying to run down. And it's just fueling that aggressiveness behind the wheel if you're in Jenkins' spot. And he knows time's running out just as the sun is setting behind the tree line. On this race, there's going to be very few opportunities, maybe only one opportunity to try and get this pass done, as they got to work through the GT car there of Zachary Tankersley, I believe, the number 2 driver. This is going to hold Jenkins up a little bit. He's going to get pinched to the outside there. That is not what he wanted coming through Stavilo, but gets the job done, drops a little bit down. That gap now 1.5 seconds and expanding.
That might be the race. That was a huge crucial moment there. That's going to lose him about a full second, not just on entry into the right speed sweeper, but he was forced to the outside, put a tire in the gravel. That is going to lose a bunch of time for Jenkins as we come to the white flag. Brock Morris has taken this thing flag to flag. What's the number for laps led? 42. As it's been, domination, it would seem, for Morris. But the reality of it all is Anthony Jenkins has had the pace all the way through this final segment. He even, again, lost a second with an off-track moment that caused an off-track violation. Brock Morris madly trying to get the lights flashed at Anthony Barranco. He gets by. That's crucial. Jenkins, 1.4 is the gap. He'll have the slipstream up the hill here on the GT3 of Barranco. Can Morris get by that LMP2 car up ahead of him? Yes, he can. Smooth sailing, clean waters ahead for Morris. He is taken off, and Anthony Jenkins, that moment with Tankersley, might be what decides this race with just a few corners to go.
Yeah, and for Jenkins, he was hoping that his fellow Anthony might have been able to do anything to inhibit Brock Morris as they made the run down to Eau Rouge, but Barranco, wanting nothing to do with that battle for the lead, wisely pulled over, let Morris through, and then gave a tow inadvertently to Jenkins up the hill through Radion. But now he's got the traffic of the LMP2 to work through, and as we've seen, LMP2 traffic has been some of the most stubborn to pass for these GTP drivers, and even though he's gained 3/10 through all of that, I don't think he's going to have enough time to get up to the rear bumper of Morris and try and put a move on him.
And the clock runs out. Next time by will be the checkered flag. And with just a few corners to go, the gap back to 1 second. If Jenkins can find the corner of the gods here in the high-speed sweeper, he could maybe try a send down into the hard braking zone in the final chicane. Now 8.5. He's getting there. He's closer and closer. I think Jenkins is going to get as close as he's been, even closer than the finish we saw back at Daytona. But it will be no cigar. Into the final set of turns, Brock Morris. He's 1-3 on this season. Through the final couple, Jenkins held him steady all the way to the finish. But it's going to be the victory. P number 4, or P number 1 for the 4th time on the year. A photo finish at the line. Brock Morris is your race winner at Spa-Francorchamps. What a finish.
Yeah, I have to say, I didn't expect it to be that close of a finish there at the end, but what happened to Maicon Ghizzoni? He was leading by many seconds, but Jeremy Eshelman is going to find himself as a winner in LMP2.
I'll tell you what happened. He cut out a pit stop. He never made his final pit service. Does this race on only 3 stops to Ghizzoni's 4.
Well, we talked about it at the top of the hour that pit strategy may be a factor, and it was a huge factor in LMP2 for Jeremy Eshelman, coming away with the surprise win there. Alex Jacobson, he's going to be your dominant winner in GT3, 57 seconds in hand over the Mercedes of Matt Mars.
How's that for a little bit of a moving burnout? Brock Morris burning down the rears there, tonight's race winner. What a drive from Brock Morris there to bring this one home. Let's run you through your final results here in tonight's Spa-Francorchamps multi-class, extravaganza. Truly was a really, really fun race here tonight. Just waiting on a couple final finishers, and then we'll have your final results. A couple drivers finished up the race right now. Jay Davis is going to bring it home, P7 there in the GTP. So we'll give you the whole rundown, the whole order. But Gizzoni and Anderson are going to round off your podium there in LMP2. And in GT3, it is going to be Jacobson, Mars, and look at that, back on the podium. My teammate on Monday nights is going to pip Zach Tankersley. Anthony Branco will get P3 in the GT3 class. Just waiting. We're almost there. A couple more drivers just finishing up the lap here at Spa. But, well, as we get ready to show you the final results here, if you had to sum it up, and I know it's a hard thing to do here, if we have to sum this night up here tonight in a word, Brian, what was the word that decided this race today?
I got to go with thrilling. That was thrilling from the drop of the green flag all the way to the checker. That was just amazing, amazing, amazing.
It's incredibly well put. Thrilling is right, and we are so glad, selfishly from our perspective, as I'm sure you guys at home are as well, for how much fun that race was. All right, well, let's give you your final results here in the Prototype Challenge, Round 5 at Spa-Francorchamps, the endurance race. Let's run you through it. Your race winner, leading 43 of 43, Brock Morris, holds off Anthony Jenkins once again for P1 in the GTP class. What a battle all the way to the finish. Jenkins is going to pip him for pole and for the fastest lap bonus points. So we'll pick up a couple on his day, a couple consolatory consolation prizes there. And Evan Gilmet, talk about a quiet race, coming home with a successful night, the same as Eshelman. It was the case for Evan Gilmet. Awesome job there for him. He holds off for P3. He holds Salas off to take the final position on the podium. Salas 10 seconds back down the road there in P number 4. Brandon Dempsey in P5 there. He'll round off your top 5 before Faraz Ibrahim and Jay Davis make up the end effectively of the drivers who were actually in contention there, who were left on the racetrack at the end of the race. Let's take a look at the LMP2 leaderboard specifically. We'll throw that to you, Brian.
Yeah, Jeremy Eshelman coming away with the victory in P2, becoming an excellent master of pit strategy in this one. Maicon Gizzoni, he was the leader for a lot of the race, but has to settle for P2 tonight. And Brandon Anderson, his close competitor, battling for the lead for the majority of the race. He'll recover to finish P3 on the night. Decio Lima, Jody Nielsen, and Ignacio Arroyo will finish in 4th, 5th, and 6th behind our top 3, followed by Gustavo Ferraro, Christopher Pugliese, and Aaron Stanford.
And we'll round it off here with your GT3 leaderboard. Again, a bit of an abridged order because only 5 cars in the field here tonight, but your winner in dominant fashion, all the way flag to flag, Alex Jacobson in the McLaren brings it home. Fastest lap, Anthony Branco with a little bit of consolation there, and Matt Mars was the hard charger in the Red Bank racing car there. He comes home in P2, making a one-off entry tonight in the GT3 class. He'll be back, I'm sure, to GTP for the rest of the calendar. So it's Mars and Branco rounding off your podium in the GT3 class. Zach Tankersley in the early exit from the race. Mr. Dustin Wells will round off that order. Let's get right into it. Let's get into your post-race interviews. We're going to send it to our man, Mr. Brian Zinn. We're going to get Mr. Brock Morris in here with you as we get started on our interviews for tonight. Again, I want to thank all of you for watching. We'll do an interview with each of your top 3 here in tonight's race. So it is going to be Morris. It is going to be, well, I think we're going to do Jenkins. I think we'll take a moment here to talk to the guy that, put on one of the great performances we've seen that didn't result in a win this season. So we'll do Morris, we'll do Jenkins, and then we'll get you Eshelman and Jacobson, your champions in the other classes. All right, let's get it started. We'll pull them in the booth here. Let's chat with your race winner there in the GTP class, Mr. Brock Morris. Welcome to the booth, Brock Morris. Brian Zinn is with our race leader in the prototypes.
Yeah, absolutely, Brock. Fantastic finish there. Seems to be the story of the championship season so far through 5 rounds. Talk us through kind of what your thinking was there in the closing laps as you saw Anthony closing up rapidly behind you over those final few laps.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that seemed to be kind of the story of the night, was just over the course of the run, like he kept getting bigger and bigger in my mirror. And, we got to that final stint. I came out, I think it was like 7 seconds ahead. And I was thinking, okay, maybe this time will be different. And it was not different. He was right there, right at the end again. And I was just thinking, like, I can't throw another one away. Like, I felt like I kind of threw away last week, threw away Daytona. So I started making some pretty aggressive moves with some traffic, but it seemed to all work out in the end. And that was probably the best win of the season so far for me.
Yeah, and something else to talk us through. The second pit stop, you had the overcut on Anthony, and kind of had to defend against him when he was on hot tires, and you were still bringing your tires up to temp. So, were you kind of thinking this might be the deciding moment for the race? That if you let Anthony get by, it was going to be hard to run him down, or did you feel pretty confident being able to hold him off there?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it seemed like each of the stints, he would be able to track me down in clean air, and then the dirty air just seemed diabolical tonight. And I know behind a couple of lapped cars, like, you could really tell. And so I didn't think I had necessarily the all-out pace he might have. Especially we were talking strategy in there, and he was taking rear tires every time, and it was definitely showing. And I think if he got around me, that probably would have been it for me, and then I would have had to make some kind of strategy call, which hasn't been great for me historically the past couple weeks. So, I went for all I could in that moment and just prayed the car would stick, and luckily it did.
Absolutely. Well, you guys turn to Monza next week. How are you feeling going into the dome, the Speed Dome in Italy?
Well, recent experiences at Monza have not been great for me. They've been great for Marshall over here, but
I love
not
Monza.
necessarily me. Yeah. But yeah, so I think it's going to be an interesting challenge there. It's going to be really racy, considering how the rest of the season has been, and considering how just Monza is. Probably going to be a lot of bold moves being made, but yeah, really looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, before we let you get out of here, any folks you'd love to give a shout out to or thanks to?
Absolutely. First of all, Kettering University and Kettering Esports, Juicy Spider Studios, the High Side Podcast, FMA for putting this on, and special shout out for you guys for commentating an hour and a half of that. So I appreciate it.
Well, when you put on a show as good as it was, it makes it easy to commentate up here in the booth. But we will let you get out of here for the night and start turning your focus to Monza next week.
All right. Thank you, guys.
There you go, your race winner there in the GTP class, Mr. Brock Morris. Yeah, he was implying there, I think, something to do with Monza, me having the one up on him. I did have a nice car advantage this week in the Mustang versus the Corvette in FMA GT3 this week. Did pick up the win over him there at Monza, but rare that Brock Morris in the 05 car, whatever the 05 car may be in any one of these series, rare that it doesn't come home with the checkered flag. I'm sure he'll be bouncing right back at GT3 next week, and I'm sure he'll be trying to follow up tonight when we return to Monza next week. Let's chat now with Mr. Anthony Jenkins. We will get somebody other than a race winner in a class tonight, and it's because, my goodness, did he have a busy and you could argue the best night you could possibly have to not come away with the checkered flag. Anthony Jenkins, it's got to feel like deja vu for you like it does for us. You and Brock Morris down to the finish line every week with these close finale finishes. If one thing had to go a little bit differently for you to take away that win in the final stint, what would it have had to be tonight?
I can't remember what lap it was, but I got myself a slowdown in Radeon, so that cost me probably a second and a half. So it's, I made mistakes. Brock didn't. I give him the nod.
And the other one that we kind of pointed out in the moment, I think it was the second to last lap. It was coming to the white flag. I think it was Zach Tankersley there in the GT3s and one of the final corners onto the backstretch where you have to carry speed. Not just that moment in a vacuum, but in general. How much of a role did the GT3s, that extra slow class, in addition to the LMP2s, how much did traffic play a part in your battle tonight?
Absolutely, traffic. It's generally speaking, going through traffic, you want to be the lead car. And I wasn't. because again, Brock just did a better job tonight. He got out front, and yeah, traffic sure.
Well, it's already very clear. I said it all throughout the broadcast tonight, especially at the finish. The Thursday night Prototype Challenge Series feels like the Jenkins and Morris show. You guys are putting on an awesome fight to the finish every week. All the FMA title battles are close right now. But for you, as a guy that's won the GT3 championship before, you know what the long season prowess demands in order to bring home a title. What do you think is going to make the difference between you and Brock this season? What do you think you need to nail through the rest of the calendar to hold him off the championship?
You got to prepare every week, and you got to finish every race. If either one of us, drops it or has a crash or whatever, that'll be it.
Well, you're going to have an opportunity next week to try to keep it on the racetrack, a track that with the open setup, I'm sure you're going to trim out for top speed. Monza, the speed drome over there in Italy. Tell me a little bit, how are we feeling the Prototype, bringing it to such a high-speed circuit? Is that going to suit you pretty well?
Yeah, I'm pretty strong around Monza. I'm sure Brock is also, so it'll probably be another sweat fest.
Sweatfest is the right word for it. I like that. Well, thank you, Anthony. Thank you, as always, for giving us your awesome camera. We got to you plenty on board and all your great battling here tonight. Any final thoughts? Anybody you want to thank? Anybody you want to shout out at home?
I want to thank Brock for bringing an awesome race every week. You guys for the broadcast, FMA for putting on a good league, and my wife for letting me play pretend race cars.
Really appreciate it there, Anthony. Awesome job tonight. It's going back and forth. You got Brock in just this fashion in a very similar moment at Daytona earlier this year, only fitting. Eventually, he's going to get one back on you. It was a great night tonight. Congratulations. Hold your head high, and I can't wait to see you back here in 7 nights' time.
Hey, hopefully so. Maybe on the top step next time.
Sounds like a plan. Well, great to chat with Anthony Jenkins. We're going to make him the one exception for the night there, not chatting with just the class leaders here in each of our classes. But speaking of class leaders, we're going to send it to you, Brian. You're going to chat with the gentleman who came into tonight here leading the point standings, did Mr. Jeremy Eshelman. And he's going to lead the race just the same. Your race winner in the LMP2 class now joins us in the booth.
Yeah, Jeremy Eshelman, talk us through the end of the race there and how you were able to pip your way up to the top step of the podium.
Really, I just realized very early that I could take a pit stop off, but just by saving just a hair every stint. Looking at my fuel usage, and I was a little surprised how early the other leaders were pitting in those other stints, and I realized about halfway, I'm like, man, I don't think they can go one more stop, or making it on just one more. So I just kept running my race and kept them in my sights.
Yeah, and it definitely paid dividends for you as you walked away with the win by over 12 seconds. And was there any time near the end of the race that you were potentially concerned that the strategy may not work in your favor? You saw that lap count may be fluctuating there at the end, depending on how the GTP leaders were working through their race.
I mean, that's always a thought in your head. You hear every noise and everything could go wrong that you think when you have on the right strategy. I didn't when I saw he pitted with 13 to 14 to go, roughly on my overlay. I was like, I thought I had it. I mean, obviously you have doubts as it goes on. I was surprised he made it to 1 to go. I'll give him credit for stretching as far as he did, but yeah, I made sure the fuel worked. I think I could have been a little closer to them if I was pushing. I don't think could have beat them straight up if it was just straight speed. I think they just were a tick faster than me, but I just ran my race the whole time.
Yeah, definitely. We were commenting, especially through the first half of the race, that they were duking it out amongst themselves, and you were just kind of hanging in the background and waiting to see if maybe either one of them made any mistakes that you could capitalize on. But turns out you were playing the long game all along.
Yeah, I was definitely watching their battles. I was waiting for a slip up, but they looked like they kept it pretty clean. I wish I could have got just a hair closer, start sniffing their draft. I wish I had that. I couldn't get close enough for that. Take advantage of it, but yeah, I'll take how this turned out. I love this track, and I'm 2 for 2 here now in FMA.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, definitely kudos for being able to fuel save so much even without the draft. And as we turn our attention to Monza next week, another high-speed track, especially in the LMP2 car, what's your strategy and game plan going to be?
I haven't looked that far ahead yet. Monza hasn't been one of my strongest tracks in about any car, so I'll definitely have to put a little work in this week to prepare for it. hoping to, for another podium. That's always the goal for me in the series. But yeah, Monza I know is one of my weaker tracks.
Well, best of luck to you. Hopefully you can eke out another victory through some fuel strategy. But before we let you get out of here, any folks you want to give a shout out to or thanks to?
I'm just, again, FMA, great group of people here. I'm really glad that I've joined this league. All the races have been very fun and supportive, and you guys put in a great broadcast. So I really appreciate going back and watching these. It makes it fun to recap them.
Yeah, well, absolutely. It's our pleasure, especially when the action on the track is so great to cover. So congratulations again on your LMP2 victory, and best of luck next week in Monza.
Thank you.
Well, there you go. That was your race winner in the LMP2 class, Mr. Jeremy Eschelman. He'll hold his lead in the championship he brought into tonight's race. He'll bring it with him coming back out on the way to Monza next week. He's going to be tough to beat, and we've seen a variety of races this year for him. It's not just the speed that he can beat you with, it's the strategy, it's the consistency, a true all-rounder. And speaking of all-rounders, let's talk to our final gentleman of the night, your race winner in the GT3 class, and he does so on Monday nights fairly consistently. He's a pretty dominant driver in his class, and he's a pretty dominant driver in the overall standings in the FMA Monday GT3 Series. No surprise he was so dominant tonight here in the Prototype Challenge, one-off with the GT3s. Mr. Alex Jacobson, it was one of those races that I think in the lower class, typically that's where all the racing is. That's where all the cars are typically in an average official race. Smaller grid size tonight, but we talked about it all the way through. Even with your big lead there, it was going to be tough to deal with traffic and play it safe. Did you have any scares, any little moments that got your heart racing in the middle of this hour and a half?
I think just the end of the race. I don't know if you guys caught that on the broadcast, but saw the leaders in GTP coming, and I was telling Brock afterwards, I was like, I just didn't want to ruin their race, so I just went for the pit lane and hoped that I didn't get a black flag for anything. So that was the only real moment that gave me a scare.
In terms of the race running here at Spa, I don't remember. We did do a race here end of last season in FMA GT3. I think it was last season late. In terms of your comfort with this track, running the GT3, how difficult is it in the span of an hour and a half race, just in a vacuum, running an endurance? By the end of the tire stint, holding off with the short fuel stints, was it still technical? Was it tough there on the race car, even without too many on-track battles?
Yeah, I mean, I had a couple moments where, I don't know, just got in my rhythm and upshifted, an extra time that threw me out a little wide, and had a couple slides. So it definitely is easy to just lose a little bit of focus for a second and you're gone. So still had to keep on my toes. But, to be honest, I love the endurance races. I love the longer races. Kind of gives me a chance to settle in. So for me, it's easier than the sprint races.
Yeah, and hopefully more to come this year. I know we've already talked about having the GT3s make more appearances in the Enduros the rest of the calendar. I'm going to do a service kind of to Racer Nexus in general, because I know we've talked to you, a good amount there on Monday nights in GT3, but just as a whole, as a driver that some people might recognize from a variety of different series around FMA, just to the people at home, what's your driving niche? How do you sort of think of yourself as a stylistic driver? Is there a discipline you're best at? Is there a track type you're best at? What should people expect from you if they see another series?
Oh man, it's a lot, a lot to think through. Honestly, I'm typically not like the absolute fastest on like a one lap pace, but I tend to keep it clean, which is usually my strength, is just keeping it on track, and that's how I tend to do well overall. So I just like to not get into too many aggressive battles, just pick my battles when I need to, and just hopefully be there at the end.
Hey, don't downplay your pure pace, Mr. Jacobson. There's still a wet spot sitting in my chair here in my racing rig from the sweating I did. I'm trying to hold you off there on Monday. You were an absolute burner. I wish you would have had more of an opportunity to show it tonight with some more cars in that division. But you hold it off, you dominate, and you're currently 1 for 1. You've won 100% of the GT3 class races in Prototype Challenge. So hold your head high. You got anybody at home you want to give a shout out to or a thank you for?
Just shout out to my wife. Always understanding of my hobbies, so just appreciate her.
Understanding of my hobby is a good way to put it. I'm going to use that. I like it. Also, again, we look at some of the rigs in this series. We get the onboards and cameras, and I think it shows just how much some of the wives are the true MVPs here in this series.
Right,
some of the
exactly.
crazy sim setups. I'm sure you're not running anything too shabby there as well. So no, I like that. Thank you so much, Alex, for joining us in the booth tonight. We hope to see you back at the other GT3 rounds of Prototype Challenge the rest of the way.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good night, guys.
There you go, Mr. Alex Jacobson, your race winner in the GT3 class. It's going to cap us off more or less for tonight. That is all she wrote when it comes to the final results here in today's race here at beautiful Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps for the 5th round of the FMA Prototype Challenge Series here on Thursday nights. Don't forget, subscribe here to Racer Nexus on YouTube. Hit the bell so you get our notifications for when races are starting. The reason I bring that up is because we got a little bit of everything here, don't we, Brian? We got, GT3 on Mondays. You got Next Gen running on the weekends. We got, I'm sure I'm forgetting something. Racer Nexus also covers other series. We did a special event the other night, a kind of a thank you race from Racer Nexus, where I got to see some drivers from some of the other series we cover here on FMA, and oh my goodness, there are some burners in some of the other GT3 series, and even a Lucas Oil Pro Truck series, which I just love Stadium Super Trucks, so I love that series gets covered here as well. So much variety, so many great drivers. So again, subscribe to Racer Nexus, and whether it's me, whether it's Brian, whether it's Alex, Rob, Richard, anybody, whoever's covering a race, you're sure you're in for a good product because Rob does a great job. Want to go one more time? We'll touch on the calendar for the rest of this season series. Again, going to Monza next week, April the 23rd. That's Thursday, 1 week time. Back to 60 minutes for a sprint. So set your watches. You won't be up quite as late there on Thursday. Hockenheim makes up the last of the month of April, and then Le Mans on the 7th is our final sprint before Silverstone on May 14th. That is a 2-hour enduro there. Get ready for a barn burner there. Then Imola Sebring going to round off May 21st and 28th, and the season finale, double points for all the marbles. I would imagine that a guy like Jenkins and a guy like Morris will still be battling for the title by then, so tune in for that one there. That's going to be on June the 4th. We wrap up the Prototype Challenge calendar. We want to thank TrackCams TrackCams 22 for all that they do here for this series and all the great content they provide us. And finally, let's wrap it up there. Any final thoughts from me, Brian Zinn? It was a pleasure having you join us today. Usually it's Alex Goldschmidt there alongside me in the booth, but you did an exceptional job today. I would gladly get a rotation going, and we had a lot of fun. Are you gonna take away from this race the positive memories befitting of how many good battles we saw today?
Yeah, absolutely. I had huge shoes to fill for Alex, who's off doing his real-world commentating for my favorite one-make series, Porsche Cup. But I love sports cars. It's my favorite discipline to race on iRacing, so getting a chance to cover it at a fantastic venue such as Spa-Francorchamps was an immense pleasure for me to do this week, and the racing was just sublime. It was fantastic up and down the grid through all three classes. I think the addition of the GT3 class as a special for the endurance was a good decision from the FMA admins. It really showcases the dynamics of true multi-class racing that you can find on iRacing. And I'll just do a plug for FMA and for all of our series that we cover here on Racer Nexus. If you're watching along and you feel like, man, I really want to be out there experiencing what I'm watching here on YouTube, find those links in the description, join the Discords. Every single community that I've been a part in, either broadcasting or racing in, has been fantastic. The camaraderie is excellent. The friendships have come along, have been great as well, and it's just a really fun thing to do. It elevates our hobby that we love to do just to that next level, and it's been a pleasure sharing the booth with you tonight. I would agree. I hope it's not a one-off, but I will yield to the excellence that is Alex next week and be on standby should any coverage be needed going forward. But my first time covering FMA, it was a wonderful experience. This is a great thing that these guys have going, and the product on the track speaks for itself.
Well, you filled the big shoes well. It was a pleasure to have you here tonight, Brian. On behalf of Brian and the entire Racer Nexus team, I'm Marshall Crocker saying thank you for watching the FMA Prototype Challenge Series endurance race here tonight at Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. Brock Morris, Alex Jacobson, and Jeremy Eshelman, your class winners tonight. We'll see you in 7 nights' time at Monza next week for round number 6. Have a great week, ladies and gentlemen, and we will see you all very soon on Racer Nexus.